This is Spartan 117.
Anyone hear me? Over.
Isolate that signal. Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.
Welcome back to Finish the Fight, a Halo podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Reiners.
And I'm your host, Alex Kendall.
And as always, before we get into the topic at hand, let's go over some current events.
Some might say the appetizer. I'm starting that now. A year and a half in, we're going to call this the appetizer. We're going to get to the meat and potatoes.
We're still learning as we go.
But yeah, so as far as salads go, let's talk about what we got going on. I would say one of our two of our biggest contentious pieces of news is, one, we have our Halo 4 flights open. So I know in our last episode we talked about them not being 100% on when they were going to get that pushback in there, but now we've got that rolling in. I know we've talked to like our patrons, people on social saying, I got in, like I'm playing it, it's beautiful, love the armor, things like that. So yeah, that's really our good news.
Our good news.
And our somewhat mixed, muddied bad news is about Halo Infinite.
Yeah, there's these issues with the armor coding, and some won't theoretically be available at launch, and they're behind a paywall, or you're just going to have to grind super hard for them. And it's just a controversy right now that, 343 Industries has posted about it on their blog, and it's really just kind of one of those things where it's like we just need to kind of sit back, at least like Alex and I are sitting back and kind of just seeing what unfolds, because there's a possibility how they're going to tackle this is going to change based on fan feedback.
Yeah, and we don't really know anything for sure right now. I mean, we know the marketing. If you're loving your Oreos and your Taco Bell and Mountain Dew and Monster, you know what's going on in the Halo universe.
Yeah, just because, as we've discussed, chances are marketing contracts are there, so they just need to go through them and hopefully re-sign a few. Because imagine it's like we have all this Taco Bell and Monster, and then 6 months from now, it's just dead.
And I think they will, because I know that Taco Bell is a huge gaming partner when it comes to, especially for console launches, for giving away consoles, things like that. So we'll see it coming up. And then to kind of end it on some, fun little news, I forget who they gave it to, but Xbox and Microsoft playing in the memes of the new Xbox looking like a fridge, delivered a fridge. So there's a full working Xbox that is just a giant fridge, and I love it.
Microsoft is doing well with that. We're past the appetizer. We're hungry. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's topic. We are covering Halo 5, and today this will be part one of our two-part series covering the game itself. Halo 5 Guardians is the second original title in the Reclaimer saga developed by 343 Industries. The game takes place 8 months after the events of Halo 4, following both Master Chief and Spartan Locke. The game was released October 27th, 2015, and would be the first Halo game to be originally released on the Xbox One. Though rumored to require 60 gigabytes of hard drive space, the game would release at 46.19 gigabytes with a 9 gigabyte day one patch. Halo 5 would receive more than 10 DLC updates that included new maps, game types, weapons, armors, vehicles, stances, emblems, and customizable skins. Now let's talk about the early stages of development. We're going to start out with a quote from the great and legendary Frank O'Connor. Quote, "The Chief is the core hero in the story, without a doubt. Forget how long you played as each character or whatever. It's really about contextualizing the Chief. As much as Locke's an important character in the universe himself, he's also going to be useful cipher for you to explore Master Chief's character from an outside perspective."
And to really jump into this, 343 did struggle with player retention in Halo 4. Regardless of how successful the game was, fans saw 343 Industries push back some core Halo traits. We talked about this before, where the OG Halo 4 was like, hey, that's like Halo. And they went, never mind, let's scrap it out.
Exactly.
And so the drop-off surprisingly surprised 343 Industries. Halo 5 needed to be different. Halo 4 was also met with mixed reviews from the community itself. This was the chance for 343 Industries to really, redeem themselves in their eyes, and I think in fans' eyes as well, as, okay, we came out with kind of this like weird softball Halo 4 game. We need to like pack punches in this new one to really get people on track. But 343 Industries didn't want to make a Halo game that felt comfortable. They wanted to take risks, and they really needed to. Pre-production of the game would heavily focus on figuring out how to implement the new Spartan abilities for the game and how they would work in multiplayer. They also wanted Halo 5 to let fantasies of what it means to truly be a Spartan play out. Around the end of development for Halo 4, studio head Bonnie Ross had asked Josh Holmes, which was the Halo 4 creative director at the time, if he had wanted to be the creative director for Halo 5 as well. Holmes was indifferent about this since he had stepped away from Halo 4 around the end of development. When Holmes would return to develop on the next Halo title, it would be as an executive producer. So I think they really know, and we've seen this with Infinite. Creative directors, I think a lot of the brunt falls on their shoulders for this.
Yes.
So I think he's like, I'm going to be on the sidelines, kind of just like tracking the money and see how things are going, and we'll throw someone else in that pit.
Yeah, and when it came to that, he had this to say, quote, I took a break at the end of 4, then wrote kind of an overarching creative brief for some things that I think we'd want to go after as a team for next-gen gaming. That became a kind of high-level framework for the team to then ideate against. So Holmes had actually been talking to Tim Longo in 2012 about being the creative director for the next Halo game. Longo would come in as Halo 5's creative director 4 months into pre-production. Holmes would then focus more on managerial roles at 343 Industries. By the time Longo had joined, 343 Industries was already throwing around the idea of squad-based play. They were also talking about expanding Chief's story, but not through the Master Chief himself. 343 Industries head Bonnie Ross also specifically wanted more women in the game, which worked perfectly for the number of characters that now needed to be in the game, because they were talking about having more squad-based gameplay.
Exactly. And their easy pickings was like, okay, let's toss Blue Team in,
Yeah, because she wanted Halo to appeal to more women. The Xbox One that they were developing the game for could also handle worlds big enough for 4 players on a mission at a time, which was the main reason that the squad mechanic was implemented, not only for the narrative drive, but a technological one as well.
The art team would start work on Halo 5 right before Halo 4 shipped, since they had just wrapped up, basically just packed their desk up from 4 and went, okay, now on to 5. They didn't really take a break from that. They wanted to get right into it.
Yeah.
In fact, in some interviews, a few months before Halo 4's launch, some 343 employees were already commenting on Halo 5. The original concepts for the game had the whole story on one planet, but this eventually turned into the game being on several planets and a ship, which would eventually cause a good amount of stress for the team. The influence to jump around planets came from Halo 2, and the influence that came from playing as different characters throughout the game actually came from Halo 3 ODST.
Hell yeah.
343 Industries actually almost didn't bring Buck back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually assumed that, Nathan Fillion was off limits, who was the voice of Buck, because, he had become like these pals with Bungie and was working with them on various projects. And, it's one of those things where it's like, do I ask that friend? I mean, he's friends with his other friends, and I'm not really friends with them anymore. It's like,
we're not on talking terms.
He's a working professional. If you have money and a cool project, he will join it.
Exactly.
I think it was a necessity to kind of tie in this idea of past characters we've seen and kind of loved.
Yeah.
To like become a Spartan and see that change.
Yeah, and there was that weird tension of like, well, he's doing Bungie stuff. We can't talk to him. And he did start working with Bungie originally because he loved Halo. 343 Industries was growing so much for Halo 5 that they would get a second studio just to house the sheer amount of employees that they would hire for Halo 5 before finally moving into the new studio entirely. When it came time to finally present what was going to be Halo 5 to the rest of 343 Industries, Josh Holmes would jokingly tell the team, quote, "You're all going to say, what are you guys doing to Halo? But that's the point. It's important that people don't go, oh yeah, it's just another Halo game. We need people to reinterpret what Halo is." So even 343 was telling 343, we're doing something different. You guys may not like it.
And judge it how you may. Hindsight's always 20/20. At that time, you're thinking, okay, we've had what, 6 mainline games? We need something to like pump it up, like to get fans like jazzed about it.
Yeah. One of the advantages of creating Halo 5 was that 343 Industries wasn't building a studio at the same time of developing a game like they were with Halo 4, because that was a huge point of dismay for the development. 343 Industries also wanted to transform the franchise and have players experience it differently than ever before. They wanted Halo 5 to be a story that was a culmination from the movies, books, comics, and etc. Keep in mind, in 2011, Frank O'Connor said you'll never have to read the books to understand the story. Halo 5 was written as a game that would be a jumping off point for all of those stories, into the next kind of series of books and comics and all that. It was meant to be as accessible as possible to hardcore fans or players who had never played a Halo title before.
And as is Halo tradition, the engine for the game was rebuilt from the ground up, this being the main reason why the game runs at 60 frames per second. They would still leave some fundamental elements of the engine in there. Getting the game to run at that 60 FPS was almost quadruple the work, and one of the biggest challenges for the development of the game itself. For the most part, the game runs at 1080p, but when the going gets rough on the game's engine, the resolution might decline slightly to keep up with the 60 frames per second. The Havoc engine was also implemented into the game in order to further drive AI behavior. And really what that Havoc engine does is it takes off from your core engine, it takes off a lot of that brain power that has to kind of like deal with, okay, we got to process, our frames, we got to process our enemies, our dialogue, our this, and having separate like mini engines kind of like with the Havoc in there allows just for more of that brain power to be used elsewhere and to get us, sadly, we're talking about having to get it at 1080 60p because I am a PC superior. But for a console to kind of work with that, it made sense to really bring in those assets and those big guns to make it run truly as smooth as possible.
Each asset from Halo 4 also had to be rebuilt for Halo 5. Any new assets that were built or remade on the UNSC side would still try to cling to that realism of the future of Halo and its technology. By this point in the Halo timeline, translators for the Covenant dialect were starting to be available to the UNSC, so now players could hear grunts screaming in terror as they run away. Because remember, by the end of Halo 3, we could understand the Covenant. Halo 4 starts, we can't understand them now, so now it's kind of back to, okay, they're speaking English, essentially. The new audio for the game would have to be recorded organically, meaning the sound of the bubbling water came from natural hot springs in Iceland, or a falling piece of metal during gameplay would have to be recreated by throwing wrenches off of a crane onto the cement. The sounds of the guns in the game were also recorded organically. To recreate the sounds of bullets hitting or ricocheting from far away, the audio team would sit behind a cliff with their microphones while sniper rifle sat 1,000 feet away and shot near their location, which sounds terrifying, actually.
And to tangent a little bit, this is, if I had to redo my career and I had like cat of 9 lives, I would want to just be like an audio foley engineer.
It's so fascinating.
And just create stuff like this. I love it, but continue.
They would even contact police to help shut down a small street so the team could shoot blanks down the road to record how the weapons sounded near buildings. Different locations were used to create a library of different weapon sounds, allowing the team to change how the weapon sounded according to where they were shot in the game, whether it be in space, a small room, or outside, which I love. It's like something you don't think about. You just get, typically you'd think you just get a sound of a gunshot and that's it.
Yeah, because this is also around the time where I think just so much more of that foley work was being put into games, especially. You kind of always had this idea in Hollywood of it and making it, but now having the budget to really not only put it towards the music, but the sound design itself, I think really changes that landscape.
Yeah. Teammate callouts during firefights were also added to recreate the sounds of fighting. This meant voice actors had to have their lines heard at different distances to have realistic sonic space on the battlefield. The sounds of Halo 5 needed to be dramatic, yet believable.
Halo 5 was being developed for the Xbox One, which some at 343 Industries felt was a challenge, while others saw opportunity. The Xbox One allowed 343 to expand upon the Halo universe in ways that were hard to imagine before. Developers working on Halo 5 wanted the campaign to be filled with worlds and battles on a more epic scale, including larger missions with more enemies and larger firefights, while also bringing enhanced immersive audio and sound to the player at that consistent 60 frames per second. These all had to be done to accommodate the idea of 8 mainline players.
And I mean, those were the two goals. It was making a game around 8 players in 60 frames per second. That was one of the biggest, I think, things that you heard in marketing. It's just very first thing. Like, so what's Halo 5 about? They're like, it's about 60 frames per second.
Yes. And we want 8 characters that are going to be there.
They all move 60 frames per second, and they eat Taco Bell.
Exactly. Do the do and ring that bell.
Spartan abilities were also a hot topic for Halo 5's development. Sandbox design lead Chris King would often bring up Batman as a model for what the Spartan should be, specifically Christopher Nolan's Batman.
The Batman, some might say.
I agree. They also implemented these Spartan abilities in order to enforce the melee portion of the Golden Triangle of gameplay, which is, we haven't heard Golden Triangle for a minute.
Listen, if you're a Fireman player, you know about that triangle. All right, so let's move on. Let's move on to kind of maybe getting this game into player hands, seeing how it's working. The beta. Halo 4, as we've said, did not have a multiplayer beta. This was due to the fact that 343 Industries just assumed everyone would hate it and wanted them to change it in a more classic style. Not a great way to start out your first full game as a studio. But after Halo 4's multiplayer was met with little positive feedback, they knew that Halo 5's multiplayer needed a beta. Also, after the rough MCC launch, Bonnie Ross would state that they will never release another game without fans being able to see a beta beforehand.
Yeah, we even saw Halo Wars 2 beta at this point. Like, so maybe we'll get a Halo Infinite one? I don't know.
Who knows? The multiplayer beta would be started earlier in the year than even like some of the news and nuances of Halo 4 that we saw previously, because they wanted to make sure that there was enough time that they could get it in, get players to be able to play, and get some aspects of it to get that feedback to return to the development team so they could fix bugs and hear what fans wanted and, you know, their likes and dislikes. Basically the Santa, some might say, of the gaming universe. The backlash from Halo MCC's release also added to the need for flawless multiplayer the first time around, adding a lot of internal testing and high-volume gameplay on the dedicated servers. Some changes included increased base movement speed and strafe acceleration, decreased top sprint speed, and reduced automatic weapon effectiveness in Smart Link mode. It also announced in the beta that Halo 5 would return to Halo's esports roots with a focus on arena gameplay and the establishment of the Halo World Championship, the HWC.
Yeah, when it came to this, Josh Holmes said this to say, quote, "It was a treasure trove of data that we were able to use to not only improve core gameplay aspects, but also our network performance as well. We continue to do extensive testing internally and externally to ensure this is the best experience at launch possible. In February, we announced several changes based off of this feedback." The beta was the earliest beta ever in Halo's history in terms of beta launch to the initial release date. Official stats from the multiplayer beta would show over 181 million kills, over 6 billion shots fired, over 20 million matches, and then, you know, upward of over 2 million hours played.
And honestly, one of my favorites, 207 days worth of players carrying the battle rifle, the BR.
Such a weird...
The true weapon.
It's just such a weird little thing of data. They're like, oh, by the way, over 207 days... people have carried this gun.
Yeah, and to kind of wrap this up for you, we had like 6.6 million kills with the sniper rifle, which was the most kills from a single weapon.
Which is weird. I wouldn't expect that.
I wouldn't either, but I would say that the one stat that's, I think, impressive, interesting, I guess you'd say, overall, is only one player was able to earn a Killpocalypse medal.
So all the other Halo 5 beta players just sucked.
They were just using the sniper rifle.
I did play that beta for, I'm pretty sure I did. And I've said it before, I just got swamped very quickly. And I was like, huh.
Especially when it's like a non-ranked based thing and it's just kind of everybody in there playing.
343 Industries would look through players' feedback from the beta, and some main points that 343 Industries would address were increase base speed, increase strafe acceleration, reduce top sprint speed, modify ground pound controls to prevent conflicts with crouch jumping, and general tuning and bug fixes for Spartan abilities.
They would also make some changes to the weapons, such as for the sniper rifle, improve the scoping experience to make it less quote-unquote clunky and kind of faster to quick scope, basically.
Even though everyone was already using it.
Hey, they're dominant. They need more kills. The DMR, adjust the position of the scope to improve visibility. Bring back the Spanker rocket launcher as a legendary version of it. So having varieties, which we'll get to talk about. Reduce bonuses for automatic weapons. Remove grenade detonation in midair. And ability to turn on and off the vibration of weapons, like that feedback that you get from like firing a gun. And finally, just general bug tuning and fixes for the weapons themselves.
Oh, yeah. Now let's move on to the later stages of development. And I want to start this off with a quote from the lead writer, Brian Reed. Quote, "We spent a lot of time brainstorming about what might make the chief go rogue. What would he do and how would that change still fit with his character? And I hope the fans are going to be really into it."
Yep.
They totally.
They played it. Yeah, I mean, once again, hindsight's 2020. I know players, I think one of the bigger things they had an issue with campaign wasn't necessarily the gunplay or, you know, some of the aspects of it, even the crewing. But I think it's a little bit of that story and why Chief has like fetishizes his AI, I guess you would say.
Yeah, but let's talk about some theories out there and some of the original concepts. So there was a lot of speculation about the original story of Halo 5. Though 343 Industries has never confirmed that Halo 5 was intended to be a mainline Halo game, an overwhelming amount of evidence says otherwise. And 343 Industry employees has told some community members in the past that the game was going to be a spin-off game centered around Agent Locke. At one point in development, the game went from a spin-off game to a mainline Halo title, which might explain the abrupt plot and gameplay elements that were far from the Halo norm and supposedly went through an entire rewrite, cutting open world elements and collecting clues like Halo 3 ODST. In February 2020, Halo 5 concept art would be released, showing one of the original directions of the game. The Didact would have been a key player in the game, albeit a broken down version of his former glory. The Covenant would have been like morphed together with their Promethean comrades.
Interesting.
Becoming these cyborg, hybrids of Forerunner technology. Some leaked UI concept art would also suggest that Halsey, in fact, was going to be the main baddie of Halo 5, with Cortana originally going to stay dead, but Microsoft's marketing team felt that they needed to bring her back.
I mean, I could definitely see the reason to bring Cortana back, and don't get me wrong, out of Halo 5, I do like the story or idea of the created, and kind of Cortana being this AI that is somewhat beating rampancy, but like feeding into it at the same time to like live forever.
Yeah, it's like she swallowed rampancy to live forever. So to live forever, she had to be crazy.
Yeah, it's like become rampant, basically.
Yeah.
And I definitely like that. But, as we saw in, Escalation and things along those lines of seeing like, Halsey and that becoming pretty much rampant, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
That would even be a cool bad guy to deal with, that has this intelligence and kind of moral ambiguity around everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to this day, though, the original version of what became Halo 5 has yet to be confirmed. It doesn't help that during the development of Halo 5, the lead writer, Christopher Schlurf, left 343 Industries and would be replaced, as we said, with Brian Reed, strengthening those theories. There's also a video of Brian Reed discussing some of the original plot points of Halo 5's story that have since been taken down. So if you're not already donning those tinfoil hats, be making them or be taking them out of the closet, because this is where we are. 343 Industries would change the classic art style of Halo even further in Halo 5. With Halo 4, it was assumed that what stayed the same for Bungie-era Halo was due to the fact that they didn't have the time to change literally everything. Thus, using Reach's assets to go off of.
Yeah, like the Covenant, for the most part, a lot of the Covenant vehicles are pretty identical to like what they looked like in Reach compared to some other things. And yeah, it's never been stated, but a lot of people were like, they probably ran out of time, so they just kind of rezzed up those old ones. Because then you think in Halo 5, it's night and day what all those vehicles look like.
Exactly. And we've gotten some excuses of it of like, oh, but, there's different Covenant. Like, there's different aspects of the Covenant. There's different factions. So, the ones on Reach, those were the same ones that were using this and, like, didn't get an upgrade. So you kind of hear a little bit of this, a little bit of that. The new art style, though, that 343 had kind of developed has been a hot topic for debate within the Halo community itself on whether or not 343 Industries should have changed the art style so drastically or really at all.
Nah. 343 Industries would go through an immense amount of crunch time to develop Halo 5, when in reality, they shouldn't have, since the studio swore to reduce crunch time after Halo 4's launch. Due to the supposed rewrites of the game, this was more than likely a huge indicator as to why the studio crunched to the very end of Halo 5's development. Most developers at 343 Industries were not happy about this whatsoever. And from this, it's one of the main reasons why Halo Infinite has taken upward of 6 years now to develop. So moving on from that, let's touch on some of
So tinfoil hats, put them back in the closet for now.
We're out of here. Now we're just going to talk about some mocap. 343 Industries would spend 4 days recording motion capture for the game. It was their biggest mocap project yet, with a sheer amount of cutscenes and action just going on in just this one game. The mocap was recorded at WB Studios in Burbank, California, using Optic Trek motion capture systems with 50 Prime 41 cameras. As stated in the Halo 2 anniversary episode, many fans were expecting Halo 5 to release in 2014. They would get the bad news from none other than Master Chief himself. In an interview with GameZone, when asked about Halo 5's release in 2014, he would state, quote, "I think you may be ahead of yourselves on Halo 5. I wouldn't expect anything until 2015. What you can look forward to this year is an anniversary edition of Halo 2, which we already talked about in our Halo 2 anniversary episode when
Steve Downs was like, yeah, this is happening. Oh, wait, we haven't told the public that yet? Never mind.
That was he literally said, that was just me speculating on some rumors I read online. Don't act like you've ever been on a forum, Steve Downs.
Or use the internet. You can barely use a controller.
I love Steve Downs, but you didn't fool us on that one. Frank O'Connor would go on to explain to fans why Halo 5 is taking 3 years to develop. Because of the new engine that they had to make for the game itself was really the biggest reason. As I said, squad gameplay, 60 frames per second. That was all you basically heard for a while.
Yep.
May 14, 2014, 343 Industries would reveal the first look at concept art for the game. And this would be the concept art of the Zinghili homeworld, Zinghelios.
Yeah, it's really the first... I think it is really the first look we're truly getting at a Covenant homeworld.
Yeah, I mean, beyond just like those little, like beyond Legends. But Legends was interpretations of it, so not official.
Exactly. I mean, because, you look at Legends, we're getting basically Japanese era Sanghelios. And so it's more than, like you said, interpretation. And we obviously get text visuals through books and things like this. But this is the first, like, quote unquote, official look of playable homeworld that we're getting an idea of. Months after the multiplayer beta was over, a leak consisting of 25 minutes of music and screenshots of multiplayer menus was discovered when multiplayer beta players who still had the program installed in their hard drive opened it up. A spokesperson for 343 confirmed the leak, stating, quote, "The beta was still receiving updates months after it closed, allowing users with the beta still installed to see the accidentally leaked content."
What? Why are they updating the beta?
I assume that they were like client-siding it to like play around with some stuff, but like didn't have an interior one. I'm not really sure. But months later, Late Night Gaming would post a couple videos covering what appeared to be story leaks of Halo 5. But the videos have since been taken down since it was learned later on that the leaks themselves were false. Nonetheless, these leaks weren't ideal for 343 Industries since they felt it might hurt the game's overall sales.
Yeah, because remember in Halo 4, granted this is a lot earlier, there were leaks for Halo 4 and they were like, we're not worried about it. Like, and overall, it didn't hurt the game. Now we're seeing some even false leaks and they're just like, uh-oh.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, fans, once again, if you had come off hot, coals still on fire from Halo 4, I think it would have been okay to kind of be able to squell those, to deal with those. I mean, look at what they're trying to do with Halo 5 damage control, even compared to current day Infinite control. I think they're handling it much better with Infinite.
Yes.
And pushing it into like meme territory or playing it off or being honest with the community.
Yeah.
With this, they're honest to a point, but it was still that button-up corporate aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I think they've learned now you got to like get down to player level and like be like, oops. And that's about it. But moving on, many fans expected split screen to be brought back with the Xbox One. But as franchise creative director Josh Holmes said, quote, more people than ever are gaming online, making local multiplayer less of a selling point. This also meant the classic game mode Firefight would not be included as well.
No!
With the Halo 4 game mode Spartan Ops not seeing the success that they wanted.
Because that was an interpretation of Firefight, essentially.
To help make up for these two missing components, Halo 5 would be the first Halo game with a co-op campaign that was built around teamwork. The players would play as a squad of Spartans, with commands being given by pressing up on the D-pad while playing alone. 3 friends could also join instead to help promote replayability.
I never used those commands. I think you just forget that they're there.
I used them on occasion, like if I was playing a rough area and wanted my Spartans just to die elsewhere so I could run the other way, that's pretty much what I used it for.
With split screen missing, this meant playing co-op over Xbox Live. In an interview with Game Informer, Josh Holmes stated that all one would need is an Xbox Live Silver account to play co-op Halo 5. A few days later, though, he had to clarify with fans that you actually needed an Xbox Gold account. Halo 5 would, to combat, fans being upset about this, it would come with a 14-day Xbox Live Gold trial, though.
Man, for my OG players, going back to the Xbox 360 and Xbox getting that quality 2 months of free Xbox Live, that's what we need here.
I think any good gamer had a stack of 2 to 14-day trials, because I knew a guy who almost never paid for it. He would just always be like, you got an extra one? Cool, I got a week.
That's awesome.
He is a forager. When it came to the personalities of Blue Team, Frank O'Connor would state in an interview after the release of Halo 5 that their personalities are rather not interesting. But this was on purpose to show the contrast from the chatty Team Osiris. The main reason that 343 Industries wanted to add so many new characters was to really enforce that squad gameplay, as we had said before. This would lead to one of the biggest casts in a Halo game to date, with Frank O'Connor stating, quote, and in some ways, I'm reminded of Return of the Jedi, where you have these perspectives where you switch between places and people, and each set of people has a specific task in a specific place.
Once again, Frank O'Connor still stays with, we are the Lord of the Rings, the Star Wars, we're the big guys here.
This game is a lot like one of the biggest sci-fi movies of all time, and it's like, sure, buddy.
Yeah. So Halo 5 is based off of Return of the Jedi, but Return of the Jedi is pretty much based off Halo 5. It's pretty much one and the same.
George Lucas was thinking about these futuristic space opera shooters.
Yeah. The seventh iteration of it is really what he was aiming for.
In an interview with former Spartan Locke actor Mike Coulter, he would state that Locke is the primary character of Halo 5. A few days later, Microsoft would issue their own statement that he is a primary character, but he is not the primary character. Frank O'Connor would also say on NeoGAF that Master Chief is still the main character in Hero. O'Connor would also state in an interview with Games Radar that Locke is not Chief's equal. So that's a lie. All of this is kind of a lie. I'm going to be honest. You know it too, so don't come at me. That was all a freaking lie that was just said from Frank O'Connor.
Yeah, and I guess, too, it depends on his interpretation of it and kind of interpretations that we see. Because once again, like you said, with this rewrite, everyone kind of has, I think, their own idea of what this game's going to be.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he is still the main character. We definitely see that they are equal in some points. But, however, let's move on. Mike Coulter played Locke in Nightfall and in the Halo 2A terminals. But after landing a role for Marvel's Luke Cage, he would not return to Halo for the voice acting for Halo 5. He did record the mocap for the project, though. He was then replaced by Ika Amadi, who in his own right is a huge Halo fan and who had played all the games and read a good amount of the books before ever even thinking about getting into the role. Nathan Fillion would also return to the franchise for the first time in 5 years as Buck. Keith David returning once again as the Arbiter, and Jen Taylor as the voice actress for Cortana. The cast would also include Laura Bailey as Olympia Vale, another huge Halo fan, Travis William as Spartan Fred, Cynthia K. McWilliams as Spartan Tanaka, Michelle Lukes as Spartan Kelly, and Britt Barron as Spartan Linda. 343 Industries wanted to continue what they did in Halo 4 and let a lot of the voice actors record together in the same room at the same time. Steve Downs even did a little bit of mocap for the game. I'm sure he did. Good old Steve. And Keith David and Steve Downs also finally met after recording separately all those years in 2015.
That's so crazy.
They finally come together.
I didn't even, you don't think about it, but yeah, back in the Bungie era days, they were always recording alone. So it kind of makes sense that they never met. Halo 5 needed the biggest audience for any Halo game. Thus, the game's rating would go from M for mature to T for teen rating. To accomplish this, 343 Industries would tone down what little blood and gore there would be in the game. Now there is only, quote, occasional blood splatter effects, according to the ESRB. Granted, 343 Industries and Microsoft have declined that they pushed for the change of the rating, though Xbox executive Aaron Greenberg would state that this would help sales, and he would comment how it did work for Destiny. So moving on from that, just some quick little tidbits. The cover art for Halo 5 would officially be revealed April 28th, 2015, revealing new Spartans in the game. And after 3 years of development with 350 employees on October 8th, 2015, the game would go gold and be sent off to be mass-produced for millions of eager fans. The game would come with a multiplayer update upon launch.
Yep.
And finally, 343 Industries has no plans for an episodic or narrative DLC, which is something I think fans we're kind of expecting at this point because we've never really gotten that. So why not? And then 343 is like, nah.
Especially in the era of it and kind of the era of the episodic nature of Spartan Ops. So they're kind of like, are we getting anything like that? Is there going to be an update to our knowledge on this base? Who knows?
And they're like, no, son.
Yeah, and to wrap it up, a little bit of trivia, little tidbits. Tim Longo would inform fans during development that Master Chief's face in Halo 5 won't be revealed. So, spoiler alert, not there.
Yeah.
And finally, Halo 5's campaign would also be nearly double the length of Halo 4's with 15 total missions.
So let's talk about what's new. What has really come forth from Halo 4 that we have never seen before? So we do have the Spartan abilities like ground pound, clambering, thrusters, and the Spartan charge, along with having infinite sprint.
Yes.
And this was actually going to originally be in Halo 4, but just for whatever reason, they decided not to. So when the player sprints in Halo 5, their shields won't recharge, though, until they stop.
Because that makes sense. That makes sense that you have this really high technical armor, but running stops a battery from recharging. That's cool. But I get it. It makes sense in gameplay aspects because you don't want to be
for balance.
It's balance. I totally understand it. Lore-wise, makes no sense. but balance-wise, 100% sense because you don't want a firefight to start and then just run off and have it recharge as you're going because then it just, like you said, it feels imbalanced and it feels like you have no risk to get in a firefight at that point. We also get the smart scope, so every weapon has a zoom. So that does build into the lore aspect that I do like of that the helmets do have HUD displays for those weapons. So you still have that smart scope, which I think is a very, very welcomed aspect to the game. I know to me it's an amazing quality of life aspect of just being able to even just to see stuff further away. And only being able to do that with certain weapons in older games definitely brings a welcome change aspect to it.
But we do have the Kraken as well that was introduced, which is this giant, almost mobile base that's supposed to be based on the Scarabs and the Harvesters and whatnot. And it does appear in that Zanghelios mission, and it's just same thing. You go in there, you destroy it, and you get out. Yeah,
and let's jump over to some more of the weapons or weapon interactions. So one thing that they brought back from a call out to CE was weapons now have their own physics on the ground. So if you throw a grenade, and it'll fire basically those weapons on the ground towards you or away from you, whatever. Allowing for me to be a 360 no-scope player, as I am. So they had that. We also get the Hydra launcher. We get a couple new rocket launcher variants coming out with that. And one thing that we get that I really think it's only in there really for that squad-based aspect is reviving. So you have that ability to go over to your teammate, which, thousands of games are already done at this point, but Halo's finally like, let's do it, and you can pick up your teammates.
Yeah. You also had like the Artemis tracking system, as well as you had the, for a new vehicle, you had the Forerunner Phaeton, which is, in my opinion, something I always avoided because just controlling that thing was always kind of silly.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool there, and it's something. I'll give it.
It's something. I'll give them that.
It's something. It's added in there. And then moving back to the weapons as well, we've got the Plasma Caster, which I think is actually a pretty fun gun. That basically, if you hold down the trigger further, you can fire plasma grenades, fire more of them, which I think is pretty cool. The Prophet's Bane. The Prophet's Bane.
Yeah, which was a big
Prophet's Bane.
which was a big deal because we got a new energy sword, which we had never gotten before.
Yes, and to kind of wrap up this weapon section so we don't have to kind of jump through this, because if you've played Halo 5, one of the major aspects that has been added into this is, one, the most weapons thus far we've seen in any Halo game, along with variants. And these variants play heavily, and we'll touch on this in our next episode, play heavily in multiplayer.
Yes.
With the aspects of, getting quote-unquote tickets, I guess you would say, or consumables, of being able to use those weapons, like OG, Halo 2, BR, Combat Evolved Pistol, or even like lore variants of certain weapons that are either more powerful, ammo capacities, things like that. We'll definitely touch on that, but that'll kind of wrap up the idea of they've really, really packed weapons into this game. And that's if you want to give them, a nod, a thumbs up, or anything for Halo 5, it definitely is that. And the feeling that there is just so many aspects and so many ways to use them that we will touch on later.
Yep, it definitely makes Fiesta never dull.
Yes.
But yeah, we also have, some new enemies as well. So we have the Promethean soldiers. So at least we're having some variation of guys that look more Forerunner-ish, I guess. It's just, again, a robotic soldier. But we also have probably the most annoying thing on Earth, which is the Warden Eternal. So he's this giant, let's say 12-foot, 15-foot Forerunner commander-esque person, and he shows up every 10 minutes in the game. But I love we also have seat swap.
Yeah, I was about to say, that is the most important thing right there. Because, I mean, if any of you unfortunately had to sit through our 8 hours of CE Legendary, seat swap would have been a great thing at times.
Yes. It cost us a few minutes on our speed run here.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely beat the record, but it did cost us some time, but it's there.
But we also have the Grunt Goblin that appears more in Warzone as well, which is basically a Grunt mech suit, which is just bizarre, but I love it. And we also have the Wasp as well, which is a new UNSC vehicle as well, air vehicle.
And I think one of the things that they tried to bring back, or bring to Halo from other games, is weapon attachments.
Yes.
And these weapon attachments were kind of selected as like modifiers to a certain weapon that you're doing, that either increase scoping accuracy, magazine capacity, changeouts, knockback, things like that. I mean, you had stuff like the long barrel, which, like I said, like increases effective range, the silencer, which reduces visibility on enemies' motion trackers. So I think it's a lot of stuff that they tried to bring in that fans wanted, and they worked in some aspects. Like you said, in Warzone, like it definitely works there pretty well for the enhanced ammo capacity, long range, even have like that energy bayonet to do a little bit more melee damage. So once again, this is also an aspect I appreciate with Halo 5. And I think, in my opinion, they implemented weapons very, very well in this game.
Yeah.
And tried something new that I think, for me and a lot of fans I've talked to, appreciate in a way, with some tweaks that they want. But I think the overall implementation of these aspects of it definitely helped out in the multiplayer vision of it.
Yeah. But now that we have, kind of a quick overview of what is new in this game, let's talk about the marketing, a very hot topic for this game. So without a doubt, Halo 5's marketing missed the mark by miles. The marketing became too fixated on the tagline, quote, hunt the truth, and thus the game overall suffered because of it. IGN would outright state in an article that the marketing lied to you.
And to clarify, the marketing is fantastic.
Yes.
It's beautiful, it's well done, it tells an amazing story, and it's interesting, but it markets the wrong product.
Yeah, it markets a completely different game.
So we want to state that off. The marketing is done very well in terms of visual, storytelling, all those aspects. As far as selling Halo 5 the game, like Jesse said, and even with IGN, it sold you a completely different product.
Yes.
So we'll touch on that as we go.
But let's start off with the teaser trailer. Axis Animation would create a teaser trailer for things to come in the Halo franchise. The trailer would show Master Chief wandering through the desert with a robe and what appears to be him searching for Cortana. A Guardian appears before him, and then it ends. Which I will say, when I first saw this, that was the first Halo 5 hype that really just got me going. I mean, it was the first Halo 5 hype.
But it hits hard.
Yes, because it's other than him wearing a robe, I don't know why he's wearing a robe, but just still seeing that, you're what is this machine? Why is he out here searching alone? Oh my, what?
It gives me PlayStation exclusive vibes, if that makes sense.
Yes,
Nathan Drake,
yes.
It gives me that aspect of it of almost Tomb Raider things. He's exploring for this. He's a lone soldier. It awakens that. It's be awesome. Pull out that AR on his back, fire it, try and get through it. But it's an illusion. It would be really cool if those were included. Because like you said, the hype immediately went from little blurbles to skyrocket.
Exactly. When the trailer debuted, it simply ended with Halo. There was no number afterwards. Xbox president Phil Spencer would state that this wasn't a game trailer at all, rather just a trailer for the franchise. He would also confirm that a new Halo game was indeed in development. The original trailer, in fact, did have Halo 5 on it, not just Halo. So there was an original trailer that leaked, I think from Axis Animation itself, that did have Halo 5. So with the teaser trailer alone, we're already seeing some ambiguous things come from it.
And then we move on to Halo: The Journey. 343 Industries would create a multimedia series that included games, novels, comic books, live-action animated series, and promotional materials that ran from 2013 until the release of Halo 5. The Journey refers to Chief's personal journey after Halo 4, as well as other major characters of Halo 5. And here you are, in order of release, to get you an idea of, once again, you don't need books or comics to know what's going on, but here's the list of them. So in order of release, we have Halo Escalation, comic book series, late 2013. Halo MCC, those little tidbits that were put in with Locke in there, late 2014. Halo Nightfall, which is a digital live-action series, 2014. Halo New Blood book. Hunt the Truth, which is a podcast in early 2015. Halo Hunters in the Dark, which is a book in about mid-2015. Halo Last Light book, late 2015. Halo The Fall of Reach, an animated series of late 2015. And finally, Halo 5 of late 2015. A little trivia on that. Halo the television series, unannounced for fall of 2015 to release around the same time as Halo 5, was there to kind of help build up the hype and build up the game. After being indefinitely delayed until recently, it is still unknown if the planned television series is considered part of the journey. So it was always still kind of it's in the air maybe.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that's unconfirmed. But literally everyone's 343 has definitely turned their ideas that they had for the franchise from Halo 4 and 5 just upside down on its head. We've seen that, very much so. But let's quickly touch on the Hunt the Truth podcast. So Hunt the Truth is an episodic podcast that does have 2 seasons, and it starts with Ben Jarreau, who's supposed to basically write this puff piece about the Master Chief. Remember, Ben Jarreau was in the Halo graphic novel. He was that Oni agent who he did PR for them. And so, the first look that anyone would have of Hunt the Truth was through the Hunt the Truth Tumblr account. Just so you all know how old this episode is. And it was set up like a journalist blog. Eventually, the world would listen to both seasons of Hunt the Truth. They were released again episodic through 2 seasons.
Yeah, and really what it did was it took him, like you said, this is kind of fluff piece of just kind of getting a PR piece out there about Master Chief. really started to get on this deep dive through Oni and this like Oni rabbit hole that he like fell down basically. And it starts to give more aspects of the universe. And like you said, kind of between 4 and 5 of really some stuff we might not know.
Exactly. And it was a rather successful podcast because it would make its way to the top of the iTunes podcast charts with over 6.7 million listeners. And I will say I recommend the first season for sure. Second season's kind of whatever. First season for sure is great.
Yeah, and it really brings to life Halo in a new medium. And I think they did it expertly, I would say. To just really create, because I love stories like in podcast form like that. And it's
so great.
It's just so well done. So like Jesse said, definitely check it out. Whether you want to listen to it for marketing or lore or just to have another piece of podcast to listen to, we are #1 podcast. But if you want to listen to something else, definitely check that out.
And then, we also had a launch trailer that would advertise Halo 5 as, quote, one of the greatest hunts in video game history. And that was at E3 2015, where they had also announced Warzone as well.
And jumping over to that E3 2015, the first mission shown was a Spartan Lock mission.
Uh-oh.
In an interview after the premiere, when asked if the game is split evenly between Locke and Chief, Josh Holmes would simply state that the narrative is told from 2 perspectives.
I always love that. So is this an even split? It's a split.
It's told from 2 sides. We know that.
What's the percentage?
There's 2 stories.
There's 2 percentages.
Yeah. But moving on, we jump to some live action trailers. In February 2015, a photo of Master Chief collapsed under a monument would leak online. This would lead many fans to believe a new live action trailer was coming. And when asked, Microsoft would only state, quote, Xbox and Halo have a tradition of creating rich narrative events to entertain and delight fans, including award-winning campaigns such as Starry Night, Believe, Remember Reach, and more. We have no details to share at this time and look forward to exciting and surprising fans later this year as work continues on Halo 5 Guardians.
I'm glad that they asked the PR robot when they got that. So are we getting anything? We've made a lot of live action trailers.
We have made these things, such as 1, 2, 3. Thank you. I mean, I will say it is probably the best PR piece they've put out in a while at this time of like, listen, we have made some really cool campaigns for these games, like marketing campaigns. We're excited about this one. Stay tuned.
Yeah, and this was those trailers where it kept switching perspectives. It was like Chief running past people dying, and then finally like it was either Locke approaching Chief who was collapsed or Chief approaching Locke who was collapsed.
Exactly. And the final release date and release aspects of the game would be released through these trailers.
But quickly, let's talk about Halo Nightfall. So this 5-episode web series would debut on the Halo channel with the launch of the Master Chief Collection. Created by 343 Industries and Ridley Scott's Scott-Free production, this series gave fans a background about who the new protagonist of Halo 5 would be. So by the time you started playing the game, you have a better understanding of him. No, you didn't. But Bonnie Ross would state, quote, he is human. He's always been human. But at the end of Halo 4, he is really reflecting on who he is and why he exists. That was very deliberate because the story we want to tell on the Xbox One is really important part of the main part of the hero's journey. It's more important about what he's searching for versus what the UNSC is asking him to do.
Just take a moment of silence for that, like to soak that in. They did that expertly in the books.
Yes.
Like all of Karen Travis's trilogy, of the Kilo 5 trilogy, truly explored that. I don't think they did that with Halo 4 and 5. I get what Bonnie Ross is saying, and I get that that's extremely hard to do in a game that's never truly been story-driven, in my opinion. Like, Halo's been action-driven. There's been a story behind it, but it's never been the push for it.
It's been like a shooter first, space opera second.
Exactly. So I think it missed the mark on it. We'll talk about that later, but I think it missed the mark on that a little bit. But like I said, the books and everything leading up to this, I think do explore that very well.
Yeah.
So I get where she's coming from with that quote, but it's so funny that they tell you don't read the extra media, but you have to, but we'll never mention it in accordance with the game.
Yeah, it's a topic that we could probably rant on later, but moving on. But yeah, and then some other, pieces of marketing that there were is, I had Halo Fest 2014 where, there was footage of Halo 5's multiplayer beta that was released. 343 Industries also had released something called Halo 5 The Sprint, which was this series that they released through YouTube that was a very in-depth look of how they were even just developing the weapons and the levels themselves. It's actually really cool. I do recommend it because it's always interesting the rationale that goes behind even like, should there be moss here? This gun, this scope should just be a little to the left.
5 pixels left,
dude, it's so crazy how, like, I don't want to say nitpicky is a bad thing, but how nitpicky they can be about that stuff.
And how detailed. I guess that'd be a more positive term. How detail-oriented they are with this. And once again, let's take a moment to stop real quick and say, neither of us being game developers are anywhere near that, and we're nitpicking a lot of this. They did put boatloads and boatloads of work and talent into this.
Yes.
So no matter kind of what our opinions are of this, know that this was created by an insanely talented team that put hours of quality into this and never were trying to deliver a deceptive game or trying to just put something out there. They genuinely believed in this.
Yes.
And you do see that, like you said, especially in that the Sprint series. Not the company Sprint. The Sprint is in like to the finish line, which is also not the finish line of the company, but as in the end of a race.
Which is probably a company.
Yeah, not the company of the race, but...
But yeah, and then also, they did things like pre-orders, and this was the most amount of stuff that you could get from a pre-order, depending on where you pre-ordered it from. There was dozens of pieces that were swapped out. It's like, well, you can get this and this from GameStop, this and this from Amazon, this and this from Walmart. But I think one of the big sellers was, pre-ordering the game from GameStop because you got Spartan Locke's armor from there. But and this one from Halo 5 might be my favorite one, which there was a NASCAR sponsorship, believe it or not. So in October 2015, 343 Industries would sponsor 2 cars in the Hollywood Casino 400 NASCAR event in Kansas City, decking them out with Halo 5 advertisements. One would have Master Chief graphics, while the other would have Agent Locke graphics.
Ooh, they're probably good they didn't crash into each other.
No, they did. That was the whole point. They just crashed into each other and exploded.
Insane. We need to sponsor a NASCAR car.
Kentucky Derby first.
Sponsor horse. No, I want a dog first. But then we also had like some digital launch events with lining up at your local GameStop, Best Buy, or Walmart at midnight for your favorite game. Microsoft would have their Halo 5 midnight release available, but it would be a digital one.
Yeah, because this is the point. Everything's digital. It's now digital co-op. There's no more couch co-op.
Yeah,
so.
it plays kind of like if anybody was like hearing what Jesse did the other day, going to GameStop to pre-order a digital-only game.
And mistakes were made.
And then having to go home and be like, oh, it's digital only. That's what people were thinking here.
I miss waiting in lines till midnight, going and pre-ordering the game.
Listen, but 6 hours leading up to the game, Microsoft would host a live stream featuring media from Halo, including a 343 Industries roundtable with Nathan Fillion.
Gotta love it.
Gotta love it. We also had Challenger coins. If one were to have purchased Halo 5 on a military base, they would receive a challenge coin. The coin was shown Locke and Chief facing off head to head. So a little nod to the military and little aspects to which I like.
I love stuff like that.
But you know what we do love the most? We talked about at the beginning of the episode. We're talking about now. Taco Bell commercial. 343 Industries teamed up with Taco Bell to present this unique commercial for the $5 double chalupa box. In the middle of a battle with the Covenant, a Spartan tells the camera that his controller, Todd, can't put down his Taco Bell double chalupa long enough to actually play the game. Oh, that's so funny. It's like, it breaks the fourth wall because Todd, a player, is not allowing his Spartan to play because he's eating Taco Bell. Wow, what a marketing fiasco. Who would have thought? So instead, Spartan is left teabagging, shooting the ground, walking to a wall. Basically, it's Steve Downs playing all these characters through this. But it plays through this and, eventually blows himself up with a plasma grenade, and it goes on to talk about the chalupa box. But it does give you a chance to win an Xbox One X. As much as I want to make fun of this dumb marketing, I love it, and it's just so goofy, and we're getting some of that now. They definitely have foregone the Todd.
the teabagging, running the wall, because the recent Halo Infinite Taco Bell commercial, it's done so beautifully.
It's pretty cool. It's basically like transforming a Spartan, using your sweet grapple hook.
It's like the best. And by all means, it couldn't be live action, but parts of what appear to be live action Spartan outfit, I think it's the best looking one we've had.
It's
ever.
pretty cool.
It's so good.
Our next bonus episode is just Taco Bell commercials.
All 3 of them.
No, just all Taco Bell commercials in general. But yeah. So that kind of wraps up the marketing aspect of it. And to kind of recap, once we said, like we said in the beginning, they did very well in this marketing campaign. I think they hit the nail on the head on every aspect. They touched on every facet of life, in my opinion, to get this out there. And there's still plenty of more marketing little niches that we didn't really cover in that aspect that happen in local markets or that happen in very specific aspects of it. I mean, unfortunately, sadly, no pizza. But
no Combat Evolved or Halo 4 pizza.
No pizza, but we did get plenty of other aspects to it, and it really kept fans just hyped.
Yes.
Plenty of money was spent into it. However, that hype was kind of misled into a game that wasn't this kind of duel. We're going to talk about in the campaign. We do get a duel, if you even want to call it that, or a daycare slap fight, but it was misleading.
Yes.
So we'll kind of wrap it there, and let's kind of get into even more meat and potatoes. Some might say, like you didn't have enough.
Yes.
And now we're getting into maybe like a flank steak and fries.
So we're really wanting to carb you up and give you the meat sweats with this.
Yes. So flank steak and fries is now the new name.
Steak fries, of course.
Steak fries, of course. But however, there are some curlies that got into it on accident.
That's always the worst.
It's always.
I like being
over.
I like being consistent with my fries. Moving on. Moving on.
We're on the campaign.
We're on the campaign. Yes. So the story, and we're gonna go through each mission and kind of give you everything, little tidbits that happen throughout.
And of course, your hashtag detailed walkthrough.
Of course. Kind of. But during a Game Informer interview with Frank O'Connor, he spoke of Halo 5's story, revolving around Chief's personal journey through loss and contextualization of his emotions as a human soldier. Taking place 8 months after the events of Halo 4, Chief has reunited with his childhood friends on Blue Team, but since has gone AWOL. Now, Spartan Locke and the rest of Fire Team Osiris have to track them down and bring them back into the custody of the UNSC. In order to obtain help from the Arbiter in search for Blue Team, Fire Team Osiris must also help the Swords of St. Helios in their efforts in defeating what remains of the Covenant.
It's just a mission to bring back AWOL soldiers.
While defeating what remains of the Covenant.
But let's start it off with the first mission, Osiris. Fireteam Osiris is dispatched to recover the UNSC's most wanted criminal, Dr. Catherine Elizabeth Halsey. Bum, 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 bum.
Let's keep in mind that when we left off, when we covered the comics, there was still a lot of tension.
Yes.
They were trying to kill her a lot. So please just keep that in the back of your mind.
Yes. So it starts off with some piano music playing in Dr. Catherine Halsey's office on Reach, as she looks at a smiling Cortana just before she transfers her to an armored Matrix. Fireteam Osiris is deployed by the UNSC Infinity to Kamchatka to extract Halsey from Jul Mdama's forces because she has information on a series of foreigner attacks on human colonies.
Yeah, so, it was like, I think it was like, it starts with like a message from Halsey to Locke that's like, they're gonna kill you too, along with me. And it's just this random scene of like, I think people have said that this takes place on Reach before Noble Six and all them go in.
Yes.
And you see Cortana. Of course, Cortana looks like Halo 5 Cortana and not Halo 3 and Reach one. And I will say, little Easter egg, she puts down her journal.
Yes.
I love seeing that.
Little details are nice like that. I totally agree. But fighting their way to Halsey's coordinates, they find that the Covenant are under attack from their own Promethean forces, which have inexplicably turned on them, weakening Mdama's hold on the Covenant. Fighting through the Covenant and Promethean forces, Osiris finally kills Mdama and his guards and secures Halsey. So this was kind of that standoff that we see.
Yeah, and it just it's like a standoff, and then the Spartans move, and just all the elites, like their goofy motions and everything, how easily they're taken out.
Also, gripe number one. Umdama just dies in their like first kind of cutscene stuff.
Literally run up, stab him, he's dead.
Yeah, and we've been building Umdama up forever. He was like
since 2011, I think.
Yes,
11 or 12. Like
in the books and the comics, and I guess in a way, in the game it doesn't matter because you're just like in elite, stab him. But like if you knew the story behind it, and all of this, like what he's caused, and this thing he's built up, and to translate and understand foreigner things, and just like, meh. All right, Halsey, let's go.
Yeah, like it was disappointing to see that because you're just like, but he had such a cool story. Implement him in more, capture him, or something.
Something that or at least let him get away. That becomes like let him get away and then bring him back in Infinite. See, hindsight 2020. That's what I'm talking about. But to wrap this up, as they arrive on Infinity after getting Halsey, Halsey immediately begins to ask Lasky, how far has she gone? And, with Osiris, you're like, what do you mean?
How far is who gone?
Like, you're the only person here. Like, what do you mean? So it's like, it's like, starts it off, gets it going. And obviously, your hashtag detailed walkthrough, the I would have been your daddy skull, is located outside the first big structure. Not the small one. No. Don't go to that one.
I always go to the small one, usually.
Incorrect. The first big structure.
Gotcha.
Go up to the ledge on the side on the left. The skull will be there.
Easy enough. But I will say the community has been kind of split about when this game starts off with Osiris jumping out of that air carrier and like just decimating everyone.
I love it.
I love it so much. It is one of the coolest things on Earth.
If you haven't checked out the Red vs. Blue Zero trailer yet, it very much has that vibe.
Yeah. And I mean, really, like one of the biggest complaints is that the Spartans are, I will say the Spartans are too powerful in that cutscene, and then you can't really do any of that cool stuff.
Sure.
I will say that. But I think just visually, it was so good.
But visually, give me that story. These are supposed to be the most hyper-advanced soldiers with crazy tech and crazy reflexes. There should be some aspect of that, especially for a team that can work together. And that's like the idea of this game is like having a team that works together.
Yeah.
So, but I will say it's probably one of the most hype cutscenes we've seen in a while.
Oh, yeah. So let's move on to the next mission, Blue Team. The Master Chief is reunited with his Spartan 2.
Can you take that back real quick? Can you do that in your Steve Downs voice for everybody?
Blue Team. The Master Chief is reunited with his Spartan 2 Blue Team for a routine investigation of the lost Oni research station, Argent Moon.
Thank you, Arthur Morgan.
So, now we have this mission where they're talking about that Master Chief is just going hard on mission after mission. They're like, I haven't seen him this pressed since Basic. And keep in mind, if you have never read the books or anything, these are 3 strangers.
Yes.
That he's now in a Pelican with. But, obviously they're asking if he's fine. Like Fred asks if he's good. They're good. They need to be inserted into a captured Oni research vessel, Argent Moon, to secure it from the Covenant forces that are stripping it for parts. And this has always been such a thing that people point out. It's just the elites are so different now than what they were because they're walking all like they kind of have like a corn cob up their ass and they sound like this now instead of being like these very elegant, noble voices. And this is where we're starting to see that. But so they do make their way into that Oni research vessel, and while they're fighting through Covenant scavengers, the Master Chief he falls down this he falls off a ledge, and he experiences this vision. And Cortana then we see what is a guardian coming up from behind her, and she tells him Meridian is next.
Yes.
Yeah, and eventually Blue Team like walks up and is like, what's going on? And this is where he's like, Cortana's back. No question about it. Everyone's like, oh, okay.
Oh, cool, man. Sounds good.
Let's go get her. So, after deciding to scuttle the Argent Moon mission, they eventually decide, we're going to deny the Covenant or this version of the Covenant Argent Moon. So they're just going to get rid of it. So they set the reactor to overload and prepare to leave aboard an experimental Oni Prowler, with the Master Chief telling the UNSC, hey, we're going to Meridian because we're going to go find Cortana. And this is where whoever it is on the other side goes, no, we have a team already going to take care of Cortana. Keep in mind, no one's questioning the existence of Cortana. Everyone's just like, no, we got someone else going to do that. And this is where we get that legendary negative infinity. I don't like it. That was the big chief going rogue, and then they go.
I don't like it. And then they go. And I think it's the greatest line that could be. I mean, you've got a lot of one-liners. So we got the one-liners back at least.
We got the one-liners. They're lame now, but we have a one-liner.
But they're there.
And then for the hashtag detailed walkthrough, in the dark corner of the reactor room, jump on the crates and the pipes. There you will find a breakable floor. The black eye skull will be located in the room below.
Exactly. I love it. Moving on, we are on to Glassed. Osiris must pursue Blue Team to a glass world beyond UNSC jurisdiction.
Was that your AI voice?
Yes, it is. On board Infinity, Halsey learns from Captain Lasky and Spartan Palmer that Chief has gone AWOL. You know, trying to she's like, whoa, what have I missed?
Did he say negative infinity? I don't like it. He should have never said that.
That's our word from kids. I remember him saying that as a kid. That means he's gone AWOL. So, you know, and realizing that, you know, Cortana's gone and is like, because he got contacted by her and all this stuff. It's just like a whole
she's gone and back. I don't know what any of this means.
Either way, they're like, okay, sounds good. But, you know, Infinity's AI Roland briefly gets angry with the group and they're he's like, why are you blaming Cortana for Chief going AWOL? You humans. It's pretty much like that type of idea of it.
Yeah.
Oh, why are we blaming that? Let's figure this out. Why are we kind of going after this? You know, and there's a hint of talking about rampancy and stuff in there that we're kind of pushing to. And so this is where they're like, okay, we figure out kind of where Chief's going from that exact phrase he said, but also learning about kind of where Cortana's going based on these 400 attacks obviously we've just heard of.
Yeah.
So we're going to go meet at Meridian because that's where Chief's going to be so we can capture him.
Of course.
Because that's what makes sense. Okay. But we continue to this space elevator, and this space elevator is descending down to Meridian with Osiris on it.
Yes, I will say the visual of this is cool.
It's really neat. It's really well done. Mm-hmm. And like I said, the weapon play and the visuals in this game,
the skyboxes environment are good.
So
They're
well done.
Great.
And they discover, as they're going down, this colony's under attack. Mm-hmm. And so as they, they're like, yep, sounds good. You guys need help? And Governor Sloan, who is heading this colony, is disapproving of their help from it.
Yeah, he doesn't want the meddling, essentially.
Exactly. He's like, we could handle it. No, you couldn't.
We can handle it. Everyone's dead. We can handle it.
Yeah. But as the team, progresses through the colony, Sloan is like, oh, yeah, guys. You want to leave? Yeah, take the Scorpion. Just take the Scorpion.
Just get out of here.
Just get out of here. You guys are good, right? Sounds good. But yeah, once they reach the gate of Meridian Station, Osiris helps defend this perimeter. You do this kind of just defense wave thing against these Prometheans. And it kind of gets you wrapped up into the next aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it can't be a mission. Not a hashtag detailed walkthrough for you.
Of course not.
To find the Iron Skull. Write this down. Only on Legendary. You must shoot down the Phaeton attacking the friendly cargo ship. The skull will then either spawn at the nearby fence, on top of the Scorpion Bay, or the small archway near the entrance.
33.33333
Repeating,
chance,
of course.
Yes, of getting that. But now we have the next mission, Meridian Station. Osiris learns that Meridian Station harbors many secrets. That is... I don't know. That flavor text is so boring.
It's flavor text.
But yeah, so inside Meridian Station, Osiris heads to the center to meet with Governor Sloan, only to learn that he is an AI in the late stages of, deterioration. Mm-hmm. And this is where we have that mission where it's that eavesdropping mission where you just walk around and
this
listen.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the first passive mission we do.
I believe so, yes. I think we have one other. I could be wrong. But.
So that is... another intro into this game that we're getting is passive missions of just doing side quests, basically.
Yeah, it's just essentially just listening in and being walking up, standing 2 feet from someone as they're having this very top secret conversation. Because at least in other games, you got to hide behind a bush.
Mm-hmm. And this is really, we'll touch on this at the end because it's very similar to what we did with ODST. There are audio logs and some other collectibles in here that we're going to touch on kind of after the campaign and talk a little bit more about them.
A little bit.
But there's just so much of it. So we're going to kind of reveal that all at the end. But this is kind of one of those first missions that you feel that of like, I want to explore, I want to get around.
Yes.
I will say this with 343. They made that rewarding.
Yes.
To be able to explore this environment that they created so you can find these audio logs and collectibles along with doing these passive missions. So, yeah, continue on. But I just wanted to kind of touch base on that and let people know before they start to get to the end and go, hey, they didn't touch on that.
We've been cheated at hundreds of detail walkthroughs.
Yeah, so we'll give you a hashtag fatty walkthrough at the end on a little bit more of what that is.
Yes, of course. But, they do eventually get permission from Sloan to search for Blue Team. And, as they're eavesdropping, they learn that they were making their way, Blue Team was making their way towards the Apogee Station. So Osiris investigates, and they eventually go to the Apogee Station through a pelican that has been offered so graciously by the deteriorating Governor Sloan.
So Osiris is starting to figure it out, but Sloan is like doing the best at like, whatever you want to get away from here. It sounds good.
Get out of here, nerd.
Yeah. But moving on, we are on to unconfirmed. Osiris tracks Blue Team deep below the surface of Meridian?
There's question marks in here, apparently.
Because it's unconfirmed. That's what I went with. But yeah, so Osiris tracks Blue Team deep below the surface of Meridian. So once again, our flavor text is more just a description of what we're doing.
Yeah.
But Osiris and a group of the colony's Leanne Dordom Corporation security forces arrive at the Apogee Station and engage these attacking Prometheans. After clearing the station, Osiris investigates a prowler left behind by Blue Team with traces to an underground mine located nearby. Underground, the team discovers a Forerunner structure with an elevator continuing even further down. So this is where we're like, what is Sloan kind of hiding from us? So they're kind of like slowly there's a Forerunner thing, there's a mine, so it's obviously known what this is. Following an elevator trip, into that mine, into that Forerunner structure, Osiris is stopped by the Warden Eternal, so our first 10-minute boss, who is in the service of Cortana, saying that Blue Team was allowed to pass, but that Osiris is not.
Yes.
So this is kind of really where we're getting that lore building idea of like, oh, okay, what is this? Is Chief kind of working with them? And so I do like that little bit of mystery we get at the beginning of like, what's kind of going on with this? But yeah, it's our first kind of boss fight we get into. But after kind of dealing with that for now, after like I said, they suspect that they learn that there's this guardian that's kind of there, and there's like this higher powered Promethean type thing. Basically, the Forerunner thingy, Forerunner aspect. We don't really know yet. We're trying to figure out what this guardian is from the namesake of the game. So as they progress on, after defeating it, they learn about the Warden Eternal. Sorry, they learn about the guardian. They continue on, and they actually confront Blue Team in the same room where that guardian is.
Yeah, this is where we see that fist fight between Chief and Locke.
This is top 10 fights of the year.
Decade.
Yes, decade, I would say. Bruce Lee-esque, some might even say with it. No, this is where I think they should have relied less on mocap or more on mocap and had professional fighters do this.
Yeah, it was... It wasn't a good fight.
It was a weird, clunky fight that, as we talked about earlier, talking about that first cinematic of Osiris just going through everything, and then you have this. Why is it that we now have a slow-mo space fight of like the two slowest clunkers?
Yeah, it seems more just like they're just throwing haymakers left and right rather than having this militaristic training since birth. You know?
That was a huge aspect of having that combat training in close quarters combat. So, alas, judge it as you may, they do have this fight.
Yes.
Chief ends up being like, see ya.
Yeah, well, because something we didn't touch on is that Osiris team was going to use this device that will like lock the armor of a Spartan.
Because armor lock and Spartan lock are there. And he was using his namesake.
Yeah, but he pulls it out to go use it on Chief. Chief reverses it on him. And then Chief, I do love like Chief's like little kind of like FU as he like walks backwards and then turns around into the portal, because Blue Team, I will say I love that it's Osiris. The rest of Osiris team is like off in the distance, and then it's blue team, and there's a portal behind them, and then you had Locke that was only able to get there, and Chief just kind of like looks at blue team and like nods at them like, just go.
Yeah.
So I do love kind of how Chief handles this. It was just that fight that was kind of silly.
You also missed, too, in typical Halo fashion, this is only in the legendary playthrough after you played 150 times through. After Chief sticks that onto Locke, he repeats to teabag him while pointing at the portal. It's only 150 playthroughs on legendary until you get that specific scene, but it's a good one.
Yeah.
So if someone's go ahead and play it 150 times. I know, but continuing on, after that happens, this is where like the structure after blue team leaves, the structure starts to collapse. So then that's when Osiris kind of gets over to Locke and was like, "Dude, we got to get out of here. We got to figure this out." And so they narrowly escape through a portal that blue team had used earlier, thinking, "All right, we'll find them and we'll track them through this."
Yeah, and this is like the first scene where they kind of make Buck a bumbling idiot who's like always almost gonna fall off a ledge, and then Spartan Locke's like, "Oh, you owe me one because I saved you because you're like one of the best Spartans on Earth, but you're a freaking idiot."
Hey, it's different here. So that kind of starts it off. That gets us into the Rocky story, gets us a little bit more to the aspect of seeing a Guardian, of this kind of like whole structure of it, and kind of revealing what Meridian really is.
Yeah.
And that kind of wraps it up for this mission. But it doesn't wrap up our hashtag detailed walkthrough.
It does not.
And with that, we are talking about the Blind Skull, which is located in the first underground mine. Go up the shaft there, and you'll find a secret cave. Within said cave, there will be a cranium, a skull hidden there.
Hashtag detailed walkthrough, just so you all know.
There you go.
Next, we have the mission evacuation. Osiris are separated from blue team and must race to catch up. So Osiris does land inside Meridian Station, and Governor Sloan is giving evacuation orders to everyone in the colony because every time one of these Guardians shows up, it just starts wrecking the planet and destroying the planet, and it's killing millions of people every time. So yeah, and basically Sloan knows that Cortana wants to use this Guardian.
Yes, and to go back a little bit to the beginning of the game of these Forerunner attacks, this is what's been happening. The attacks are actually these Guardians waking up and decimating these planets, and that's when Cortana says Meridian is next.
Yeah, and so then Osiris is planning on taking that space elevator back up to their Pelican. They clear out their outposts at the base to save, all the Meridian residents that they can, fighting off Prometheans and knights and soldiers and dogs and flying disc things.
All of it is there to kind of stop it, halt it, to let that Guardian wake up from its little nap.
Yeah, so the Guardian then starts a countdown, and the elevator that they're on makes an emergency halt, forcing Osiris to climb the rest of the way to their Pelican as the elevator starts falling apart around them. They do make it just in time, and the Guardian travels into slip space right as Osiris flies away. But now let's talk about hashtag detailed walkthrough. In order to get the Thunderstorm Skull, you must destroy 5 traffic cones in 2 minutes at the beginning of the mission. The skull will be on the ground at the end of the mission, right before the Guardian does the EMP pulse.
Very specific.
Very specific, I know.
Now we're to Reunion. Blue team arrive at the Forerunner World Genesis, where they discover the true reason for the Guardian's activation.
Thank you, Dracula.
Blue team arrive on a lush Forerunner world, noting the arrival of numerous Guardians with them.
Yeah, because in that skybox, you see a bunch in the background, starting to show up. Again, beautiful skyboxes.
It's amazing. You see all these tiny portals going through and all these Guardians coming, tiny in the relative term of the skybox, but they're all arriving in this central location.
Yes.
They are led to a console by familiar signal from their training and encounter ragtag Covenant survivors dragged through in the wake of multiple Guardian portals. So all these you're fighting these Covenant that were just happen to come through these portals as well with it. So you're kind of fighting these forces that are not really sure what's going on, but they believe that these planets that we're going this is now another sign of those prophets, and that this is actually the real kind of Covenant is going to be within this Guardian idea of it.
Because all these species in the Covenant are just idiots. for the most part. There's like new stuff. That's the real stuff.
Big thing. Sounds good. But so this is where we now see the Warden Eternal again, who's in like another body and introduces himself as Cortana's defender. As Blue Team starts to get closer to Cortana's location, the Warden starts to interrogate the Chief over his intentions for Cortana. It's like the new like boyfriend who's way too overprotective. What are you doing with her? You talking to her? Why are you talking to her? But starts to get an idea of like what are his plans. Mm-hmm. You know, because obviously like if you're gonna try and take her, I kind of gotta stop you. Like my thing, and I've been told, is to not touch you, but I can override that.
I'm gonna touch you.
That's what he said. That's actually the line that they put in. I'm gonna touch you. And then the fight starts. The fight starts. When John responds and basically says that he's like, I'm gonna take her home. I'm taking her with me. That's when the Warden says, you're a threat and I'm gonna touch you. and that he's like truly like John is now, okay, never mind. You were okay before, but you're a threat to our goal. So we need to stop you. That's when he like summons Promethean forces to try and deal with it. After defeating this iteration of the Warden, they are contacted by Cortana directly, who explains that she arrived at the planet aboard the wreckage of the Didax ship after it was dragged through slip space, and that her rampancy was cured by accessing the domain. So this is where we get that lore aspect of it, of not understanding what happened between 4 and 5.
And still getting no context, really.
And getting no context, but at least getting an idea of, okay, ship went through here, she accessed this thing, she's quote-unquote cured from rampancy. Yeah. Basically, she knows everything now, is kind of the idea of it, because that's kind of what the domain is like the library of everything.
Yes.
She then leads Blue Team across the planet to meet her at the access point to the actual domain itself. So she's trying, I think overall, if we want to kind of pull anything from this relationship, even though Cortana's this AI that knows everything, there's still that sweet spot for John. And
always.
Yeah, and always. Possibly, we don't know at this point if it's just an aspect of being familiar with each other, or does she have a secondary, maybe evil motive for him? Yeah. We don't really know those things yet, but this is kind of where we stop on this mission and get access to it. But to give you an idea on our hashtag double detailed walkthrough, double, the Grunt birthday party skull can be found when the player enters the tunnel to the right, when they first see the Covenant. From there, you'll need to melee the Grunt on the ledge that's singing. The skull will appear afterward.
Imagine just singing show tunes and that happens.
And just cracks on like, I got it, skull. That's the only reason he's dead. I needed this birthday skull. And then finally we have the fog skull. And to find it, go right instead of going towards Cortana to enter her installation. From there, go up the hill. At the end of the pathway in the Forerunner structure, you'll find said skull.
Now we are on to the next mission, Swords of Helios. When evidence reveals that Master Chief is in danger, Fireteam Osiris mission changes from retrieval to rescue. So now we're back on the Infinity, and Locke meets with Lasky in the Swords of Helios, an escort who will be taking Locke to meet with the Arbiter. Because, you know, we've been talking about this in the Travis books, that there's a civil war going on in Helios right now.
Yes, and that the Arbiter is one of the main components of it, and then like all these different religious sects are the ones that are kind of attacking it and going after him.
Yeah, and so they land on Helios, and they work their way to the Vadam lands where the Arbiter is, and they, they're fighting all against the Covenant, who are trying to take over the planet entirely. So now it's no longer ran by, the Arbiter, who is the leader of the not rebelling Zanghili.
Correct.
Yeah, and so then Osiris gets to the Elder Council chamber, learning, that's where the Arbiter is, and they learn that, if the Covenant are able to kill the Arbiter, they're not going to be able to stop the Guardian that's on Helios. So they clear out the landing zone for Maki Chava to drop off 2 mantises and these friendly Sword of Helios elites to secure the Elder Council chamber, because remember, that's where the Arbiter is held up.
Yes.
Eventually, they do clear out that chamber, and that's where then they fly in and they meet with the Arbiter. And they kind of, like, I do love the Arbiter's exchange with Locke, because it's very much like, yeah, at one point, I know that you were just an Oni agent and you were originally sent to kill me, and now we're working together, which is like, I do love that aspect of like at one point they were enemies. Now there's still this odd tension between everyone.
And you could tell that they really wrote the Arbiter into this to be this very wise Sangheili, which we didn't really see before. Like we saw it a little bit in some of the aspects of it, but it was more so on war.
Yes.
And in battle. But now we're seeing it as almost like, not a comedic aspect, but like, isn't it ironic? You know, Alanis Morissette. They Alanis Morissette at each other.
But now let's get to the hashtag detailed walkthrough. After walking through the ruins, get on the high platform to your left. From there, the mythic skull can be found. Obtainable, it will be yours.
Thank you, Yoda. Attainable, it will be. Now we're on to Alliance. Osiris joins forces with the Swords of Sanghelios. This is our second walk-around mission, our second passive mission, I should say. So you're walking around this kind of ragtag outskirt base where you've got like the Pelican set up, and you have all these different Swords of Sanghelios grunts and workers and stuff that are just kind of hanging out and
chilling. And, you know, you're tasked to kind of explore it and talk to some people. It's almost the same, different aspects to it, but almost the same idea that we did back on Meridian. So you're going through there, and this is, like I said, once again, where you can really just play around and platform and explore and get some more grunts singing, you know, get some more little conversations, and get some more little Easter eggs, and get more of those audio logs and things of that aspect. Once again, the easiest aspect for these is to really just follow a guide for the audio logs. That's what I did playing through Halo 5, just because there's so many of them. And some of them are in like silly locations where like you'd have to explore a lot to get some. So check that out. But anyway, started off, you know, this starts off with a talk between Arbiter and Locke, and talking about that Cortana then pings every device in that camp to find this Guardian, because she's still trying to find out where it is on Sanghelios. The Arbiter refuses to help Osiris until the last Covenant stronghold on Sanghelios belongs to the Swords of Sanghelios, forcing Osiris to confront the Guardians by themselves. Later, Locke meets with Dr. Halsey, who's there, discusses activating the Guardian of Sanghelios using a constructor. So activating it themselves is like the thing they can do. And that constructor is... we've seen it before, but it's a Forerunner interface for interacting with the Guardians. And Halsey then sends Spartan Palmer and Osiris to retrieve it. Friendly reminder, she's working with Palmer, who shot her freaking arm off.
Yep. And we get a little bit of that tension that Halsey talks about while she's there. And, you know, this is kind of, these missions to me were kind of odd for Halo, but I do like that it is kind of a change of pace to get a little bit more lore. In a way. And so, yes, this is where, you know, if you found all your stuff and you've done all your side quests of talking to people, this is where you can kind of finally wrap this up and say, okay, now we're heading here.
Yeah. So the next mission we have is enemy lines. In order to activate the Guardian, Osiris must track down a Forerunner constructor. So Osiris starts heading towards the Forerunner facility holding the constructor, but they need to help the Arbiter take out, you know, the Covenant Kraken first by clearing out the ground forces. This is where we do have that mission with that ugly thing called the Kraken. So after Osiris regroups in the Sangheli Temple, Prometheans start to attack, allowing Osiris to take down the Kraken by landing on it using Phaetons, which was, again, we also get that gameplay with the Phaetons. So we got a lot of new elements in here.
Yeah, and this is really one of the bigger maps we're playing with. It's to have like a huge aspect to be able to play around and have multiple kind of missions with it, which is kind of cool.
So once inside the structure, Osiris obtains the constructor and returns back to the Arbiter's base at the camp. Once inside the structure, Osiris obtains the constructor and returns back to the Arbiter's base camp. So it's a pretty straightforward mission. Go get this thing, come back. And, you know, for your hashtag detailed walkthrough, in order to obtain the catch skull, board the Kraken and head down to find the Banshee docking bays. You'll need to get in a Banshee and find the small platform above. From there, you can get the skull.
There you go. Next, we have Before the Storm. Osiris and the Swords of Sanghelios prepare for a final battle with the Covenant. So this is another one of those kind of like getting set up, chatting about what's going on.
You got your hype speech.
Yeah, it's like a hype mission. It's like your hype mission next year.
Hype mission.
Oh, we're gonna have a great final. You're gonna do great. But Spartan Palmer Halsey, and the Arbiter decide that once Halsey plans to activate the Guardian using the Constructor, Osiris and the Swords of Sanghelios will attack the Covenant stronghold of Sunayan. So this is where they're like, okay, here's our plan with it. Let's get it thought out, and let's kind of get it rolling. I mean, this is really what we have to do to get the aspect of what we need to bring down Cortana and save the universe.
Once again.
But the Constructor starts heading to the Guardian, but before Osiris leaves, Halsey tells Locke to bring home Chief even if Cortana gets destroyed.
I don't care about Cortana. Give me Chiefy boy.
Yeah, so she has like this moment of, I think, guilt too, where it's like, listen, if anything, make sure Green Monster Man comes home and that, you know, at any cost type of thing. So that Cortana doesn't really matter. Just make sure that he makes it home.
Yeah. Then we have the next mission, Battle of Sunayan. Osiris races to reach the Guardian before it leaves Sanghelios. Osiris' first objective is to destroy 3 anti-air cannons that are destroying the Arbiter's forces on their way to the Guardian. Kind of reminds me of that Halo 3 mission, the Storm. But due to an overwhelming number of anti-air defenses, Osiris cannot be picked up and taken to the Guardian, instead being forced to travel by Sunayan's Undercity. They gotta walk. That always sucks. Subway's out. Just you can't make it there on time. As the Guardian begins singing, Sunayan starts to fall apart and Osiris is forced to race to the Guardian. Right before Osiris boards the Guardian, the Warden Eternal appears for the 7th time to prevent them from reaching Genesis, the suspected destination of the Guardian.
Yes.
So you have to go through, defeat the Warden Eternal again, and once you do so, they are picked up by Spartan Palmer and Halsey in a Pelican. And on the way, the Pelican is hit, and the Spartans have to jump off onto the Guardian itself. And now we have hashtag detailed walkthrough. To find the cowbell skull, you'll enter the large area where you can see the Guardian. Stay on the ground level and get as close to the Guardian as you can. Jump down on the beam below and obtain your cowbell skull.
Bada bing, bada boom. Next up, we have Genesis. Osiris arrives on Genesis, where they meet a new ally in their battle.
Oh.
Locke and the rest of Osiris have to run down the Guardian with their magnet boots. Basically, like we've talked about, if you haven't listened to some of our previous content, we've talked about that. And we have a bonus episode coming out soon that explores Spartan armor. So we'll talk a little bit more about, you know, the aspect of that. But yeah, so they're trying to get back down to Genesis. They're like just sprinting down this Guardian.
This mission is kind of cool though, because you see that grand scale and you're like, you keep jumping and gliding through the air.
It's really awesome. So it's really cool. And after exchanging a few words with Chief over comms, like what's going on and that they're there basically, they actually meet up with 031 Exuberant Witness. So we get a new monitor. And this monitor I really like. Exuberant Witness is really cool because it almost has thought, I guess, in a way of like trying to be like, no, you got to stop doing this stuff. You know, you're going to destroy this installation. Because it's the monitor of the Genesis installation that they're on.
Yeah.
And Exuberant Witness asks Osiris if they are there to stop Cortana from claiming the mantle, a forced peace upon the galaxy with death as the penalty. To help Osiris cross Genesis, Exuberant Witness then produces a scorpion for them to use. So Exuberant Witness talks to him, like, you dare to stop them? And they're like, yeah. It's like, oh, good. You know, I need this to just kind of stay as it is. I want to just chill here.
And then she poops a scorpion.
Yep, that's exactly what happens.
Well, what happens, for the most part, Cortana and the Warden Eternal pushed her out of her, you know, having her permissions and everything on
they're basically taking advantage of it. And very similar that we've seen, you know, any time with Guilty Spark, once they kind of lose control of a situation of their installation, they're like, no, who wants to stop them? I will help you with whatever you need type thing.
Exactly.
And so as the Guardians start to be summoned by Cortana, so all these kind of portals coming back in, bringing these Guardians together, the Warden Eternal once again shows up to try and stop Osiris from reaching Blue Team.
Oh, boy.
So fight, boss battle again. And these boss battles, they're neat, I would say. That's probably the best way I can describe it.
It was neat the first time, but nothing has changed.
He has some multiples of himself in some of the battles, and that's probably like the closest we get to like an exchange. It's kind of like a mini boss or like a boss fight that goes through multiple stages, but over the game.
Yeah.
So after, you know, defeating the Warden Eternal once again, Osiris meets up with Blue Team and joins forces to try and stop Cortana only to have Cortana teleport blue team away.
No!
Plot armor. That way all 8 of them aren't together. But, I mean, this mission's neat. I mean, the War and Eternal battles, it's grinding at this point. If you play this over several days, it's okay. You're like, oh, boss battle today. But if you just sat there and grinded it, you know,
like I did.
Yeah, when you first play it, you're like, oh, okay, same thing. It's kind of like the same exact setup, too.
Yeah.
I'm just going to hide when he does that thing, and then I'll go out and shoot him, and sounds good.
Yeah.
So, but ends with that teleportation of blue team away. And to give you your hashtag detailed walkthrough, after you defeat the Warden Eternal, go to the pile of rocks. Not the mound of them or the mountain of them, but the pile. The tilt skull will be at the top of the rocks.
Easy enough, folks. Now we're on to the breaking. The Master Chief and his team face their greatest threat and his hardest choice as the true powers of Genesis is revealed. So Chief and Blue Team head to where Cortana is, and I believe she's in this like kind of cryptum sphere.
Yes.
And they're having to deal with the Warden Eternal, who's trying to stop them along the way, because remember at one point he let them through, and now he's saying, well, never mind. Because the Warden Eternal is this one entity. He just uses all these different bodies.
Exactly. But at the same time, we are getting this conflicting resolution between the Warden Eternal and Cortana. You know, of her saying like, no, dude, they're chill. And he's like, no, I have to stop them.
He's like, this is my house party. You can't just invite your friends to my house party. I don't know them.
Yeah, and that's pretty much why it's kind of happening.
Yeah, and even like the Warden Eternal is even pointing out that you're not using logic, Cortana. You're using your emotions to make these decisions. But, you know, he's not able to stop Blue Team. And he, you know, as you had mentioned, this is where he summons 3 of himself. And, you know, trying like this last hurrah to stop them. Finally, Blue Team does make their way to where Cortana is, but there's that cutscene where there dozens of Warden Eternals are coming in, and this is one of those things that you don't think of, but Chief tells Blue Team, because they're getting back against ledge, he goes, focus fire. They all just start scattering fire literally everywhere. They're just shooting at anything that's moving. I love it. Again, something I didn't realize until someone had pointed it out. But this is where then all of a sudden all the Warden Eternals disappear, and Cortana just comes in and like touches the last one and it disappears, and you're like, why didn't you do that from the beginning, Cortana, to help us out? But this is where then Master Chief is trying to tell her, like, you can't do this. You need to come home. And this is where she explains her plan. Like, no, I'm part of the created now. You're not going to understand. So she locks Blue Team into like this cryptum stasis and says, like, you guys will understand eventually. She's like, but for this is for your own good. You have time to figure out, you know, what, or, you know, realize that you want to join me, and you'll be safe in here.
Yeah. So you still see that, like the Warden Eternal brought up, she's still thinking with emotion in that aspect. But I think we've seen that, you know, prevail through the games. Not only is it Halsey in there, I think the AI starts to take on a lot of the personalities around them. Even Black Box, that we've talked about, which was this cold AI who didn't care about humans or even other AIs, starts to actually really care, and we see that human personality coming through. So definitely written in. I think that's written in well of the idea of that. I just think the execution of this weird love interest thing is there, and not necessarily like familiar. Yeah. It's more of a love interest, which is just kind of odd.
Yeah. But hashtag detailed walkthrough, the Famine Skull can be found in a room where the Warden Eternal spawns. Enter the hall under the Warden Eternal to find the skull.
Beautiful.
Easy enough, folks.
What's also beautiful is we are on our final mission. Guardians. The namesake of the game. So yeah, it ends with Guardians. As Blue Team's lives hang in the balance, so Osiris must save them from and stop the Guardians. So they just need to stop them. So basically, Osiris needs to save Blue Team and stop the Guardians. Osiris races to the Cryptum to save Blue Team, spotting dozens of Guardians converging. So it's obviously, it's getting time. Continuing along, Cortana starts calling the other AIs in the galaxy to join her as the created, with hundreds pledging to join her. I thought this was a really cool scene.
Because he's also calling out to all the other species as well. Ungoy, Kigyar. They're all like, you want in? I rule, but if you want in.
And during, because it's during this whole scene this is happening.
Yes, it's like you hear it in the background. It's very chilling.
Yeah, it reminds me of kind of almost Star Foxy, where like you get like the shh, and it like pops up with these like little screens of stuff. So you get that. It's like you hear these other AIs pledging. You eventually, if we haven't heard it already in this scene, we hear Governor Sloan saying like, "You got me. Sounds good. Like me and my people are with you.
We're good, fam."
So we start to hear a lot more of that, and it really seems hopeless at this point in the game. And I thought they did that very well. I thought 343 did that of like how daunting and huge this task is, and just how much you already feel like you've failed, which is really interesting. So, as this continues on, Osiris eventually makes it to the gravitational cores that, when destroyed, will allow Osiris the chance to retrieve Blue Team. But in an attempt to stop them, Cortana starts toying with them and reading their UNSC profiles. So, like, trying to get in their heads of, like, all the stuff they've done wrong and the losses they've had and, like, all this aspect of them, which I think... God, I really like that aspect of it.
Yeah.
I think as a character overall, I think Cortana was written decently throughout this.
Yes.
And like the idea of like becoming this rampant AI and knowing everything. So done pretty well. But to her dismay, they have successfully disabled the cryptum, and Cortana shuts Osiris out. But thanks to Exuberant Witness, they're able to continue through. So Exuberant Witness is with them along, like, no, this is my installation.
Hell no.
I control this aspect. They're going. Cortana then starts the slip space sequence and the Guardian's pulse, knocking Osiris down. Locke then barely manages to destroy their controls, effectively stopping Cortana from sending away the cryptum and putting Exuberant Witness back in control. And this is where Exuberant Witness then sends Cortana away and frees Blue Team from that cryptum.
This is my favorite ending to both of the 343 Industries games so far, where you just press X to crawl. Epic.
Then across the galaxy, UNSC ships and colonies are sending out distress signals because most of the AS have shut down on their planets or colonies. So we're seeing that aspect actually happening.
This part's so cool because it's the UNSC Infinity seeing just not the world but the galaxy start shutting down.
Yes, it's so neat that it's just such a wide scale thing. It's awesome. But like you said, aboard the Infinity, Cortana suddenly appears with a Guardian, but the Infinity goes into slip space before it can be destroyed, running from Cortana until Infinity can find a way to fight any of this. Yes,
because it's literally. Roland's like, are we just going to run? And this is where Lasky says, not until we find a way to fight.
Yeah.
And that's basically, that's like the first little ending.
Yeah, because then we get, like this kind of like ending of kind of like, all right, let's calm down. And on saying Helios, Blue Team and Osiris return to the Arbiter's base camp, meeting up with Halsey, Spartan Palmer, and the Arbiter to kind of give these talks of like, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, and I know that's what happens in Bad Blood, the book, but really it's just Halsey walks up to Chief and just says it took you long enough.
Yeah,
and the game ends. And so this is the first time we're ever seeing in a game those two meet.
Yes,
not meet, but they're reunited.
But they should be reunited from the Fall of Reach, pretty much.
Yep.
From those aspects of it.
Yeah, and so it's so crazy to see, but
to wrap it up for our hashtag detailed walkthrough, run up the ramp behind the Gamma Core. Once you get to the top, jump across the ledge onto the Pelican. Next to it will be the Tough Luck Skull.
And finally, let's talk about the legendary ending. So after the credits have rolled, Cortana will be heard humming as the camera pans to a floating halo ring. And I believe she's kind of humming something along the lines of what 343 Guilty Spark would hum as well.
And then, like I said, we're going to touch a little bit on the mission intel. So the mission intel are these objects found within the Halo 5 campaign, replacing terminals. So we're not having terminals anymore. It's these little logs that we find. And they are audio logs that fill the player in on backstories to various characters and events, and as well as, insights into like the minds of these characters and what's going on. So unlike the terminals, which are all identical in appearance, mission intel are depicted in different ways. So, like on sort of saying Helios, it's data disks, or there's UNSC data pads. So there's different ways it can be found. There are a total of 117 mission intel pieces that can be found throughout the campaign. So we'll kind of just break them down slightly, just to give an idea of what's kind of going on with them and the aspects of them. So on Osiris, you get 7 pieces of mission detail that kind of depict pretty much all of Halsey's research notes on it that's kind of researching these Forerunner signals before the fall of Cortana, I guess you would say, or basically as the Guardians start.
Yeah.
And then a little bit with Julum Dama and just some little tidbits with an Ungoy personal log and Covenant combat orders. So that is really the first time we see it. Then on Blue Team, we get a total of 8. And all of those are pretty much these test results that are trying to figure out what's going on with it. And we kind of start to figure out that these tests were pretty much a way to kind of figure out this morbidity rate. You have to kind of listen through them, but it's basically test results in this lab. We also just get some logs that kind of talk about different aspects of Argent Moon and what has happened in those mining facilities.
Yeah. But yeah, like on Glast, we have like 6 pieces of intel that are from Evelyn Collins talking about Meridian from day 1, 5, 17, and then also talking about received shipment, as well as, we get some history of Meridian itself.
Yeah. So we get Evelyn Collins, who's this basic scientist that moved there and get an idea of like what's been happening over it. And then we jump to the Meridian Station, and this is where we get a bit more of that history of Meridian, as well as personal logs from settlers and about a deglassing incident to kind of deal with kind of resetting all this metals that's around there. So once again, we're kind of giving you this hashtag fatty walkthrough that's just going over these in general. I would definitely recommend reading through these and going over them, but a lot of them, like we said, are just little, some are lore, some are just kind of like filler, like Skyrim books, basically, to kind of give you some ideas of what's going on.
But yeah, then on Unconfirmed, we're getting messages from the Apogee Station, along with we're still filling in more of that history of Meridian. We're getting like a drill operator's personal log. So it's I like how it's also like it's spread out, like history of Meridian is in some levels and other levels,
because it ends up wrapping up in evacuation with six pieces of intel, with the last 2 histories of Meridian on there, off-world messages, and these were just kind of talking about Governor Sloan, and don't worry about it, like I think they're going to be fine, and talk about the elevator, little things that have happened within these missions that are giving you ideas of maybe what happened with something or why does this look this way. Yeah,
and then on Reunion, I always love the Ungoy personal logs because they're super silly, but we're also getting, UNSC Marine status updates. And something is there's this Forerunner record search and really go in a deep dive of what the Bastion is. But there is this search for that, and it's super interesting and super cryptic. So these are, a great way because it covers that. It covers 4 out of 5 of the, the search for that Bastion.
And then jumping over to Swords of St. Helios, this was actually a really fun one to get because we actually have 12 mission intels, and we have our first 3 that we're getting are Ceremonial Sword. And this is all these different hilts of a sword that bear proverbs of St. Helios. Then we get all these kind of patrol logs, and then what I love is we have Kit Pitlimp. Love the name.
Same.
Which is searching for foreign secrets. It's basically this quote-unquote explorer. And I love that it's basically this Ungoy who's like, going through, exploring stuff. Julum Dama said I should find stuff here. So it's fun. Like Jesse said, the Ungoy archives are probably my favorite because they're the goofiest in here.
The silliest.
But still tell stories with it. And then we kind of wrap up with messages to Kitun Arak. And these are these loyalty messages from brother to brother. And it gives you, I guess, more of that familiar insight into, home life and worrying about like, oh, where are you? What's going on? And really diving a little bit into more of that schism that's been happening. Yeah.
And then we still get more Zenghelios lore on Alliance, where we're having like Camp Quartermaster personal logs. We're getting medics personal logs, linguistics reports, like some kind of boring stuff. But then I love that we're getting, one of my favorite ones is Dr. Halsey's status, but one of my favorite ones is Do Not Open, which is a rare Zengheli attempt at interspecies love poetry by Vale Truckick. So,
but let me let's set the mood. Fire, crackle. Robes on. Here we go. Erase previous recording. Begin new recording. I saw you standing at your ship, with armored hand on armored hip. Both my hearts begin to pound. So lovely was what I found. I love your brightly shiny armor. Human, named Commander Palmer. I wish that we... What were you doing here, Grunt? What are you laughing at? I will tear off your arms. Oh, it's so cute. See, Palmer, Covenant lover.
But we also then have enemy lines where we have more Zinghili personal logs, the Ungoi personal logs, message to Jakul Arach, and other, we keep going about the ceremonial swords. We have one from Drab Limist called Dear Covenant, Please Read, which again, the grunt ones are hilarious because we also have more Kit Pitlimps.
Some Kit Pitlimp adventure. And going up, I do love the Ungoi personal log 023, which is from Grimyat Pid. Mourning a friend and vows revenge. I feel lonely today. I lost Jib Jib this morning. He fell during the battle at the Elder Council Chambers. He thought he could kill the Arbiter and help the Ungoi's place in the Covenant, but one of the Spartans killed him. I will avenge him. I will kill the Spartans and keep their armor as a trophy.
Hell yeah.
I love it, man. Once again, listen to these. They're fantastic. And then we have Before the Storm. And there we're getting the final Honor Guard reports. We're getting some Singhili security officer reports, and which I love this one, an Ungoi science report. And that's from the scientific observations of Grib Yam, self-proclaimed biologist. Human Scientist Report Log 42. Prolonged observation of the Dr. Halsey supports theories from New Alexandria that human females signal maturity by losing appendages. If my hypothesis be correct, soon the Dr. Halsey will release her spores and spin a cocoon of rich mate silk. Truly, this is a very exciting time to be making science. Fantastic.
Yeah, then we, next on Battle of Sunayan, we have more messages to Jakil Arach, as well as the chant of the Guardian, which is really cool. Speak not to the holy Guardian of Sunayan. Pray only that it remain still. Let it not stir. Let it not tear our world asunder. And then we have the prayer of the Guardian as well. More adventure logs from Kit Pitlimp, the one and only. And we wrap up the ceremonial sword logs as well.
Yes, for those final proverbs of it, which is a fantastic recording. Jumping over to Genesis, we start Forerunner records of echoes. And these are like very, very old records of Forerunner builders. And this is sadly, unfortunately, we find these logs on Rest in Peace, Kit Pitlimp's corpse.
No.
So sadly, Kit Pitlimp, if you go through them, even for being a grunt, has discovered who the Guardians are and is trying to discover more. So tried to venture off by themselves, unfortunately died and found these Forerunner logs. So so this basically starts to talk about a little bit more of the Bastion and Genesis and what's going on in these aspects and how these networks are connected.
Yeah.
And then we get over to some more Ungoi personal logs. Once again, great times. And the start of UNSC Intel logs. And these are talking about different Marines who were sheltered at these different Guardian planets and what happened on Sumerian and all these different Guardian pop-ups that have happened. And finally ending with the unfortunate Kit Pitlimp's last adventure log.
Sad indeed. But the next level of the breaking, we have more Forerunner records talking about basically the Warden Eternal making a pact with this, Ancilla. And so I'm trying to figure, I don't know necessarily who's trying to, or who's writing these, but it's really interesting to see, there's still some stuff going on in the background of, this record of someone just being what's going on here?
Yeah, and it's really cool, too, because a lot of these access records are on, first of all, hashtag Fatty Walkthrough, are on little Easter eggs as well. So with Kit, going back a little bit with Kit Pitlimps, excuse me. I gotta get the name correct, rest in peace. The final log, I love it, is I knew it. Kit Pitlimp has always been bound for destiny. I speak as one who has undergone the great journey. Now I will talk to the gods. I will be a god. I will... What is that creature? If you are a god, I worship you. Otherwise, worship me. Wait, no. And on the corpse of Kit Pitlimp's... On the corpse of Kit Pitlimp, we have the Light of Ur's fuel rod cannon. So a little bit of ooh, what happened within that? And On our next episode, talking with multiplayer, we'll get a little bit more into the weaponry and some of those aspects and some like the flavor text and lore behind them. But I just love those little things that jump into it, whether it's a fallen soldier or how you find these things and kind of what possibly happened in these like little mini side quests.
Yeah.
And to wrap up our intel pieces, we finished with Guardians. Guardians has our last 10. And this is where we get a couple more Sangheili personal logs that talk about like remembering their squad and past battles and things that have happened, as well as the Forerunner record alive. And all it is pretty much, once again, an undesignated Forerunner builder talking about the Bastion and about how if they can talk to the Monitor and deal with this, like they can fix this. And basically saying like Bastion lives and going on with this, like some stuff we're trying to figure out as it happens. And we wrap up finally with, you know, a UNSC personal log from a crashed dropship that basically says no idea what's going on here. There's these slip space bubbles. What is happening?
Yeah.
And finally with Sangheili personal log 977, which is a Covenant elite. Thanke Sho believes he has failed a test of faith. There's no future for the Covenant. The gods turned their back after the human woman offered the librarian's key, and Mdama took it. That was meant to test his faith, his ability to resist temptation. He failed. We all failed. This is our punishment. So kind of a very fitting last log, I guess, in terms of lore for especially the Covenant or what the remains of it are, especially in Mdama's case.
Yes.
So yeah, once again, check them out. I really think that 343 did well in these little side bits and Easter eggs and things that happen with it. So we didn't, once again, there's so much of it out there. Check it out. Let us know the ones that you found or the ones that you think that are impactful. Like I said, I love the grunt stuff and I love our, our sad rest in peace explorer that we will mourn you, Kit Pitlimp. We will. But other than that, that wraps up our hashtag fatty walkthrough. As the name suggests, a lot of data, in a quick succession for you, but check them out. Once again, it's a fun time.
Exactly.
Get them ears a burning.
Yeah, but let's wrap up this episode with the final section, cut material. What was either already in the game or was just only concept art, any ideas that they had for it. Let's start with the didact. This was confirmed by Brian Reed that he was going to be in the game. We also had that concept art leak later on.
And I believe it was supposed to be until we had rewrite after rewrite.
Yeah.
Figuring out what they're doing.
Yeah. Split screen, it was going to be in the game, but it couldn't run the game at 60 frames per second if we had it.
And I think we've even had that issue in other games. When you went split screen, it drops to like 50 frames per second and like kind of messes with that because it just couldn't handle the two splits like refreshing.
We also had tracking and revive that would have been in Warzone, but they took it out. The veto system was also cut entirely, so now maps are just randomly selected.
Yep.
In the game type Warzone, the only way to win would have been by destroying power cores.
It would have just made the game exactly the same every time.
Yes.
Instead of having a different ending.
Yeah, and you get a strategy and do it perfectly the same every time, essentially. They also had a Spartan ability called Vault, which was essentially just a clamber variation that was
cut. So I assume if you're sprinting, you can just like auto go over stuff.
Yep, that's exactly what it was. You also had double jump that was cut, and finally a flinch system was cut from this from the multiplayer.
Okay, good. Definitely happy with those. Overall, I think it was an aspect. We're gonna leave our full quote unquote reviews until the total end of this of 2 episodes.
Yeah.
But I think we'll kind of just give you a quick wrap up now of what we've covered thus far and just our impact into it going into our pretty much multiplayer episode 2 of this 2-part series. Jesse, as always, you want me to start it off?
Yes,
sounds good.
Start it off.
So once again, I'll reiterate over what we've covered. Marketing, beautiful marketing. Misguided, but beautiful.
Beautiful marketing for a different product.
Yes. If it was just like, they're like, this isn't lore, this is just cool stuff. Beautiful, amazing things that have happened. I love every aspect of it. And I think it was a cop-out to say, oh, no, that wasn't like a trailer. That was just to give you more things. And it's like, no, what's to give us more things is like what's now, where it's like Master Chief's like zoom into his helmet. That's obviously not the trailer for the game. this was looking like a trailer for the game.
Yeah, he said it was a franchise trailer. No one releases franchise trailers. What?
Yeah.
Whatever. I digress.
Either way. So I think that it hit the nail on the head with that one. But what I think they did nail the head on was just how beautiful the game was. I think the artists and renderers and the devs that put all that together did an excellent job. Gunplay feels so good. It feels modern, but not in a way that, in my opinion, detracts from Halo. It still feels Halo with the weaponry that's there and fire rates and things like that. I think there are a little too many variants when it comes to it at some point, but I think more is better in this case instead of having just like 10 weapons or something. So overall, I think it's good. I think the campaign, a little lackluster if you didn't read anything. Like, I know you nor I were really that hardcore that we read everything up to that point or watched everything up to that point. So it was a very, very confusing game. Even just trying to like take 4 and 5 just as their own games together. I'm like, how do these connect?
Yeah, and it's very loose. And I mean, really, I think the biggest takeaway that I got from the research for part 1 was that the rewrites, you know, before it was always like, I think there were rewrites. I think there were rewrites. You know, we talked to a few people that we know. Again, this is, I heard from, he said, she said, I heard this from someone who heard this from this, but people within the Halo community who are really saying, like, I've talked with some 343 Industries people, this is what they told me.
Yeah.
Like, it's been all but confirmed Halo 5 was originally going to be, you know, just Halo Guardians or whatever. It was going to be a spin-off game for Locke, and it eventually got integrated into a mainline game. Probably, in my opinion, was because they needed a mainline game as a selling point for the Xbox One.
Yes.
I really think so. If you have, essentially, you have MCC, Spartan Assault, and now another spin-off Halo game, people probably wouldn't have been too terribly thrilled about that.
No, and Halo is the Xbox seller.
Yes.
It really is. I mean, it's pretty much the mascot of Xbox. It's been that for years and years and years. So it's like we need something to push that. And so, you know, I get what they're trying to do. And, you know, if you can always say if they had more time, if they, you know, could look back on it, what would they do? But it is what it is that with what we got. Like I said, overall, the gameplay aspect of it, I think was fun. I think it's just the story and the campaign, which is what I usually play them for, was very lackluster.
Absolutely.
But if you're comparing multiplayer from 4 and 5, it's night and day.
Absolutely. But we'll dive more into that into the next episode. But, you know, that was part 1 of Halo 5 and our coverage of the early stages of development, later stages, the beta, about the game itself, along with hashtag detailed walkthrough and hashtag fatty walkthrough.
Oh, yes.
And along with some cut material. And research was done by Jesse Reiners and Evan Barr. Shout out to Evan. He did a tremendous amount of work on this episode. I cannot thank him enough for the awesome work that he did.
And thank you all again for listening. This wouldn't be possible without our patrons. So we have a Patreon, as you guys hear at the end of this episode every time, that we've got some really cool goodies for you with bonus episodes, extra aspects, you know, loot, if you want to call it that, some cool loot, exclusive game nights, chats with us, exclusive videos, things like that. You can always sign up at our Patreon at patreon.com/finishthefight. And as always, want to thank those who do support us. And with that, we have Charles Zitter, Taqtix, Skyjack, Francis, Harvey Chong, Brandon Reshetar, AngryCanadien, ZZ Slipaway, Grant Dillon, Duststorm, Mr. Chofe, Cowyn Fong-Feliciano, DragonFire, James Yervasi, Jonas, DGamer1298, Alejandro Jaramillo, Dilfix, QuantumEasy, thatLIgamerguy, Jamie Sneed, McCrae Austin, Mega, Thomas Goulding, Nick Heimann, Tuna0317, Brandon Christian, Richard Scanland, LetMeBeFrank, McChief, Welsh, Big PapaSemechki, GrantODST, and Loki 2014.
Yep. Thank you all for your amazing support thus far. And if you are interested in joining our Patreon, you can find the link to the Patreon in the description of this episode, as well as, you know, on our social, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. If you have any questions, please message us on any of those platforms, and we'll be happy to answer them.
As well as join our Discord if you haven't already. I'm seeing it pop up again and again. We got some more members coming in, which I really appreciate. Discussions there. That's really where you'll see us most of the time. And where if you really have a question or want to join the community and just chat about stuff, or, you know, some of the random channels we have, like food, or Jesse has a blasphemous monster channel. So just fun things like that. We also have a great time. So if you want to join a fun community, hit us up there. Either hit one of us up or check the description. We have a link there all the time.
Yes. And be sure to check us out on either iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, anything like that. If you want to, go on iTunes, leave us a starred review and a written review. That would be awesome. It'll help us rank in the long run. But as I had said, that was our coverage of Halo 5 Part 1. It was a monster of research, but it was just, it was a lot of work to do, and really, it's been one of our most asked for episodes for a while, so I'm glad we finally started being able to unpack all of this for you. With that, I'm your host, Jesse Reiners.
And I'm your host, Alex Kendall.
Thank you for tuning in to Finish the Fight, a Halo podcast.
Halo. It's finished.
No. I think we're just getting started.